Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 75 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union, better known as DCU. And so far this year, DCU has donated to 119 food banks and pantries, with total donations of over $2.1 million. And their commitment to the community doesn't stop at feeding the hungry. They have passionately supported numerous school programs, hospitals, veterans organizations, and other worthy causes that are doing their part to help individuals and families in need. Veterans organizations provide important and ongoing support to the brave men and women who have served our country, and recognizing the special sacrifices that both veterans and families have made. DCU's goal is to honor and support our military heroes by continuing to fund new opportunities in the areas of health, employment, and housing through partnerships with local, regional, and national organizations. Giving back is central to what they do. And I know this because the trip we're about to discuss in episode 75 of the Mistress Carrie podcast would never have happened back in 2006 if it wasn't for the involvement of DCU. Okay, this is a very special and sentimental episode for me. Now, if you go back to episode 15 of the Mistress Carrie podcast, I sat down with my producer from my 2011 trip to Afghanistan, Mike Saya. And we talked about the AAF to Afghanistan trip, where we spent 3 weeks embedded in Afghanistan with members of the Mass Army National Guard. Well, 5 years before that trip even happened, myself and my producer, Joe DeAngelis, were embedded in Iraq. We spent almost 3 weeks with members of the Mass Army National Guard and traveled all around Iraq. And we were there to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Had this trip to Iraq never happened, we never would have made it to Afghanistan 5 years later. So I thought, it being the week of Veterans Day, 15 years since the trip to Iraq, and this year marking the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attack, this is the perfect chance to sit down with my producer, Joe, and talk about Boston to Baghdad. You'd best get comfortable because this is a long one. It's impossible to put 3 weeks worth of a trip overseas into one podcast, but we tried. So get comfy and allow me to introduce you to Joe DeAngelis.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mrs. Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hello, Joe.
Good morning. How are you? Is it morning?
No, I don't know what it is. I'm so happy to see your face.
Oh my God, it's so great to see you and catch up. It's really incredible. I feel like it's been such a horribly long time. Your bestest of friends, time is not. It's disappeared, right? It's
Look, you and I went to Iraq together. We don't have to talk every day. We can pick right up where we left off, okay?
Exactly.
We literally have been through hell and back together, so it's totally fine. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry I'm running a little bit late, but you know how that goes,
I know
right?
how it is. It's all good. We work in radio, man. That's what happens.
Oh shit! What's good with you?
Everything is good. Everything is good. I've been waxing nostalgic this year, not only because of like all of the giant albums that had these massive 30th anniversaries this year, because it's like, you know, everything from the Black Album and all of the big grunge records, like all of that kind of stuff. So it feels like everybody's talking about anniversaries. But this year was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which blows my mind. And because of that, it's the 15th anniversary of our trip to Iraq and the 10-year anniversary of my trip to Afghanistan. And so I feel like I have been on this this weird
pilgrimage to restore.
I feel like I'm just going through the scrapbook of my brain. So the first thing I want to do, you work in radio in New York. So what was the 20th anniversary of 9/11 like being actually in the city?
You know, the city is a sort of different beast than everybody else in the country. The Northeast in general is more affected seemingly than the rest of the world in theory, right? But it was nuts. It's incredible to see people sort of bring back exactly what happened, what saw. Like we did a couple things with Steve Buscemi, and a lot of people don't realize Buscemi was out of the Ghostbuster firehouse, and when that hit, they were the first reporters to 9/11 because that's a firehouse in Tribeca. And so like he came down while a very famous actor and was like searching through the rubble to find people. And, you know, the city was in a cloud, and the emotion that happens in, you know, talking about that and what actually was going on, it's kind of different. And I don't mean different, disrespectful, and like everybody else didn't feel it, but like in Manhattan in general, like it was a vibe, man. Like people were in their offices and you couldn't see out the windows. Like it's such a moving thing to be incorporated in those sort of things and the reminiscent of the day and stuff. And it's just, it's a very, very kind of spiritual experience, you know?
Well, it was such a powerful thing, obviously, 9/11. And in that moment, anybody that worked in media or whatever, like your job changed, your roles changed, your purpose changed. And immediately, I think our generation knew, okay, our generation is going to be asked now to go to war. Unfortunately, it's the way of human existence that every generation has some kind of burden to carry when it comes to conflict. And so that was kind of the catalyst to how you and I ended up in Iraq together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a crazy story. And to start it, I want to go back a little bit to the beginning because you and I were unlikely partners in this thing. And you did not work at the radio station, WAF, that I worked at the time. You were not working at the rock station I was at. So do you mind going back a little bit because you're not a Boston guy? So I want to know how you and I ended up working for the same company in Boston. Where did you come from?
So I'm an upstate New York guy, which is very similar to Boston, a lot of extent, like, you know, New York City's whatever. But like I'm an upstate New York guy. Like we're still very similar to Boston in every way we act. And I was working in radio. I had a gig there for a while, and I ended up landing a job in Boston. It was back when I guess Star flipped over to Mike FM for a moment. But I got there and I'd been there less than 2 weeks. And I remember Adam, who was the promo director for AAF, his wife was pregnant. And you guys had this shit all aligned. Like Adam was going to go with you. And his wife, I don't know if it's folklore, but he couldn't go, right?
She said no.
Well, I didn't want to put that on the universe. I heard like Adam's wife is like, "No, motherfucker, you're not going. I'm pregnant. This is our first baby. You're not going. I'll leave you if you do." And so somehow I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm in. I'll be there." And I'd been there less than 2 weeks, and I didn't know anything about Boston, and I didn't know anything about you. And we met for like the first time at like a Hillman, like a calendar shoot or something weird like that. And they're like, hey, this is the guy that's going. But I remember distinctly them telling me when we filled out our insurance forms that like, if you die, it costs less money than if Carrie like breaks her arm. Like I remember distinctly and basically being like, yo, whatever happens, don't worry. You just take the brunt of it. And we signed up, and I thought it was an incredible opportunity, and we went.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, you know, I had been at AAF for years at that point. I started on the air in 98, started at the station in 91, and obviously 9/11 hits, and we kind of all know that this is going on, and had instantly, because, you know, rock stations, guys are your target audience, so we had automatically started doing stuff with the military and first responders, and we had been doing that all along anyway. And I had some listeners that had ended up in Iraq at the very early stages of the war and had started getting mail, and I was sending care packages to them. We did a big care package drive and sent like 2,000 care packages over there with stuff that people had donated. And people had, obviously back in the early stages of the war, we were hearing what was going on over there and whether it was true. They don't have body armor. There's babies getting killed. Like there was a lot of propaganda. There was a lot of stuff going on. And so I had started asking the guys that I knew over there via very slow email, like, what's going on? What's true? Because for me, we were running all of these commercials and doing all of this stuff that was getting used for recruitment by the military. And I was like, so if you're recruiting guys off of my show and sending these guys over there untrained, without equipment and all that, and they're getting killed, that I don't like that. I come from a very proud military family background. And so I was just like, you know, is it true that the guys don't have gear? Is it true that they don't have equipment? Like, what's going on? And so through these discussions, it was suggested by a guy that I knew at CENTCOM at the time in Baghdad that it's possible that I could fill out an embedded journalist packet like they do for CNN or whatever. And that if I didn't write Mistress Carrie and if I didn't write WAF, if I use my real name and use the company name instead, and see if they would approve an embed packet. And so predating you arriving for the company, I had gone to the bosses and said, I'm going to try and put this together. And it was received like it would be received if a 5-year-old comes to you flapping their arms and says, I'm going to flap really hard and fly. And everybody's like, yeah, whatever. Until the kid says, I'm going to go up on the roof now and try this. And everybody was like, yeah, okay, you know, it wasn't going to do any harm. So go ahead, just let Carrie spin herself up. They'll say no, and then she'll be on to the next thing.
Yeah, not the case.
Not the case. So it took about 18 months of going back and forth. And finally, it took like 7 signatures on this packet, and it had to make its way through the Pentagon. I mean, it's an arduous process. And I started going to the bosses going, somebody else signed off on this thing. Like, we may want to start having a conversation about how we would pull it off and what it would cost and how to logistically do it and all of that stuff. And then the conversation was, well, how are you going to do this by yourself? You're going to have to take a producer with you. And I never had a producer on my radio show, so I didn't have someone that could go. So then we kind of put it out to people that worked at AAF, and Adam, as our marketing and promotions guy, he was like, yeah, I would go. Then he went home to his wife and she was like, nope. And so this trip got to the point where it was like the military's approved it. The radio station's telling me, well, we don't have the money to pay for this stuff, but if you can go out and get advertisers to underwrite all the expenses, and by expenses, we mean the commercial flights to get us to Kuwait, the body armor, the computer equipment, the recording equipment, the satellite phone, the T-shirts we wanted to bring with us for all of the troops we met. If you can find a way to get all that stuff paid for, we'll let you go, but somebody's got to go with you. And per the embedded journalist requirements, that person had to work for the company. And so it got to the point where we exhausted everyone at the rock station. And we started, but we started looking around because literally the list of people that were even considerate was short. And when Adam said no, it was like, well, who in the building would even consider it? Because as I would be having conversations with people in the lunchroom, first of all, people didn't believe I was going to pull it off. And second of all, they were like, fuck no, I'm not going to a war zone. We were talking about going to Iraq in 2006. It was not a good place to be at that time. And I didn't even know you. You worked for a station down the hall that played all the music I hated. and all of a sudden I get word through the marketing director, who was your marketing director and AAF's marketing director, Bill. And he was like, I think we got somebody. You got to talk to Joe. And I distinctly remember you and I having a conversation about it. And it was like, you would really go? And you were like, yeah, why not? And I was like,
yeah.
No, you don't understand. Like, this trip is riding on you. Are you sure you're willing to do this?
Yeah, I didn't even think twice about it, to the point where you were talking about how when we got the body armor, they asked us to wear it around the studio for a couple of days. Remember that? For like maybe a week. Wear your body armor. Get used to how heavy it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they said at one point while we were in the studio together, like, hey, when you leave, this is class 3 body armor. It could stop this caliber bullet or whatever. You might want to give it to someone before you leave because they don't have this. I still was like not comprehending what the fuck they were saying, and I was totally on board. I'm like, all right, Carrie and I are gonna go hang out in the desert. Awesome, let's do this. Like, let's make this happen. And that's literally how it went. I don't know why, now that I'm older, like maybe we're desensitized to violence. I don't know, but I was on board, man. Like,
we made a list of stuff we were going to need, and I was talking to the guys overseas, and it was like, well, you're going to need this. You're going to need, this Kevlar. You're going to need these rifle plates that go inside. And I was like, well, it's not something you can just go buy. So I had to call an armory place in Texas, bulletproofme.com, not fucking kidding.
Yeah,
I still remember. And I had to call them, and I had to get a letter from the military because they were a military supplier, so you can't just walk off the street and buy this shit. And I was like, I got a letter from the military. I need to buy a couple sets of body armor. Here's one of the questions I asked the guy. Do the plates come curved to go over my boobs? And he was like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, okay, what do you need this stuff for? And I said, I'm a journalist, and the military doesn't supply this stuff for journalists. They had at the very early stages of the war, and then the journalists were going home and taking their armor with them. And then the military was losing all of this gear, so they said, if somebody's coming over here to be with us, you got to bring your own shit. So the stuff that we bought was the newest version of that safety equipment, and it had not matriculated down into the military yet. It was brand new stuff. And so you and I have like the state-of-the-art shit. And we're wearing it around the building. We had to warn the security in the building that there were these two crazy people walking around in camo body armor and Kevlar helmets because it was so heavy and awkward, and it changes the way that you move because it makes you not be able to bend in certain ways. And you and I wanted to take this thing so seriously that we were like, we're only going to be over there for a few weeks. It's going to be really hot. We're not going to have time to deal with the jet lag and the heat and all that. We got to be ready to go.
Yeah.
And we took it so seriously to the point where, remember the people throwing stuff in the offices?
Yeah, throw them off your helmet, throw them off your chest, throw them off your... I got a lot of the cod piece because, did you have the cod piece?
The junk protector? Yeah, dude, my junk's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, man. People would throw shit at you.
Like swing line staplers, like metal staplers, and they'd yell, incoming! And it would like get thrown at us and go chink off our body armor and fall on the floor. Like, we're just trying to sharpen you guys up.
Well, it worked. The duck and cover. We were ready to go when we took off. That's for sure.
Tell me when you told your family that you were doing this, what they said.
My mom didn't believe me. She thought I was fucking with her. And then I was like, no, but really. And then she got really weird about it and kind of had to hang up, And so I waited a while because I had, let her do her thing. And I called her later on and she said, I'm having a really hard time with this because you're going to what I'm seeing on the news is probably the hot spot for everything happening right now. But if it's what you really want to do and you really think that you can spread joy to the people in the military who literally are there defending our country, then I support whatever you're doing. So was that, that weird, no, you're joking into realization into I support you, which was really awesome. And probably because we've got military in our family as well. But it was all about anything you can do to bring a little bit of brevity to someone who is literally giving their life to be there, then I support it. Even though I know in the back of her mind, I got put on a prayer chain at home, right? I know that happened. But yeah, she eventually was supportive and that was an awesome thing.
The goal for anybody that is, new to the Mistress Carrie podcast, that didn't listen to my radio shows before, the goal for this trip was two-pronged. The first part of it was to be able to go over there and be educated on what was really going on, to see it with our own eyes, to be able to tell the people back home with the credibility that we had earned with the audience, this is what's really going on because we were there and we saw it with our own eyes. The other part of it was to make sure that the guys and the women over there knew that all of us back home supported them and that we were doing everything we can to be with them. And so we carried a lot of messages from home to them, and then through the technology of the photographs, the video, the interviews that we did, we were able to then allow the troops that we were with to be able to send love back home again. And so part of it was legitimate broadcast journalism where we were really trying to get to the bottom of what our local troops from Massachusetts that were part of the Mass Army National Guard, what they were doing on this deployment, and to cut through all the bullshit and to actually see, feel, touch the work that they were doing. But the other part of it was this philanthropic, community-based, we want to connect the audience back home so that they don't just look at these guys dressed up like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on CNN and think that it doesn't affect them. We want to communicate that these are their local guys from their communities and they are overseas doing this job and what it's really like for them. And so those two things are really important, but in very different ways.
It's funny you say that because I talked about it earlier, or I mentioned it earlier about being desensitized to it. And I think a lot of people were desensitized to the violence that was actually happening. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we went to the parade grounds, right? And at one point we're in the green zone and a car bomb went off and it was in proximity to us. And you and I didn't process in real time that a car bomb had went off in what's considered to be a green zone. And we're in a convoy, right? And so when you start to come home, you're like, holy fuck, a car bomb went off in what's considered to be a safety zone in the center of Baghdad. And it doesn't register to you. So it didn't register because I think we're so desensitized to the idea of violence, or it doesn't affect you directly. And the idea that we're able to talk to people who are from Boston, who are there every day, are dealing with this. And we just see it on the media. We just see, oh, this happened. And after a couple weeks of that, you don't fucking think about it anymore, right? There's a war happening, but you don't think about the children, the people, the brothers, the sisters, the husbands, the wives, who literally every waking moment are in safe zones, these greens. I mean, it blew my mind. Yeah. And that was so super duper important for me because it literally changed my perspective. And I think that's a big part of the reason why we went, because we were able to say, like, while you're seeing on this mass media, this is happening and they're kind of downplaying it, or at least the severity of it, we can give a real life perspective of what's actually happening here.
And it's important to note that you and I went as embedded journalists. We were given a very small list of cans and can't nots. Okay.
Right.
So we were responsible to get ourselves over there. We were responsible to outfit ourselves with all of the gear. The military agreed to take care of our shelter, our food, our water, our physical protection, and to provide emergency medical care if and when needed. Everything else was not provided, and we were not allowed to be armed. So so you and I are making all these preparations to go, and obviously you start navigating the corporate process, right? Because the company, we're starting to buy plane tickets, and you and I, we're like, this shit's starting to get real. And one of the stories I always tell people is the meeting where they talked about what happens if we die, and how our bodies get home.
Yeah. That was that same meeting where they told me that, like, if something happens to you, it's much cheaper if I die than, like, you break your leg. I think that was all the same meeting where they laid it out. Like, Harry's way fucking more important than you. Just, like, keep that in front of your mind. But if you happen to make it back, I don't know. I don't know if I ever put anything in true perspective until we got back. And maybe it was because I was younger, or maybe I didn't really understand, but being there changed the game for how I thought about everything.
Me too.
And I didn't ever think there was a moment that I was going to die. I never thought there was a moment we were going to be in harm's way. I'm like, we're going with the U.S. fucking military.
We'll be fine.
There ain't a chance. Like, we're good. We're going to be embedded with all these different folks from Boston. They've got our back. We already know we got these great guys, Nick, Greg, we're good to go, right? And it never dawned on me. So when they said that, I kind of thought they were playing. I mean, really, I knew it was a risk at the end of the day, but I just signed the paper because it didn't.
So to fill in the paperwork gap, you and I, because we were working for radio stations in Massachusetts and we were going to be working over there, we're covered by workman's comp, which is hilarious. You and I, they had to take out insurance policies on us. And because I was worth more than you, we nicknamed you the Human Shield.
That's right.
I had been blogging about the idea of all the different things that could come up that could make this trip more difficult. And one of the things was, who's going to cover the cost of remains transportation? Because it was like $30,000 to transport corpses home, because that is one of the things the military would not cover. That we had to show that we had health insurance, and the military was like, look, if you get shot, we'll save your life. And then the U.S. military is going to send a bill to your insurance company because you're not a member of the military, and rightfully so, that your medical care from us comes with a price tag. And so we were like, okay, so we had to get a letter from the health insurance company. So I'm blogging all of this. And then Julie, our GM, says, well, we don't know how they're going to pay to ship the bodies back. Because again, if you are killed in action and as a member of the military, that's not a question. But we're idiots volunteering to go over there as civilians. So I put up in a blog, and it just so happens that the coach of my softball team growing up, and the pitcher of that softball team, is a father and daughter who own a family funeral home. The funeral home is still open. They have been my family's funeral home forever. It just so happened that he was the sponsor and the coach of my softball team growing up. And they sent a letter to the radio station on funeral home stationery, said that their family would be honored to incur all and any cost of the transportation of our remains if we died. And I printed...
I had no idea of that. Like, I was going to say, did we have a funeral home sponsor?
So I printed the letter and brought it into Julie's office and put it on her desk. And I said, I got my death sponsored. They don't even want to put logos on the casket. Can we go now? And like, I look back at it now, I was so brazen, but this trip had taken 18, 19, 20 months to put together. And we're like a month or two out. Still, you know, when you have a meeting about who's going to pay to ship your corpse around, it's frustrating and it's aggravating. And you're like, that's what you're going to be worried about.
And the perspective for people who don't understand radio or media, like this shit normally happens in 2 to 3 weeks, like a month. If you have that much time, that's like, we work on such a tight turnaround as an industry. So the fact that you've been working on it for 2 years to get to that point of someone being able to pull the trigger or saying, hey, it ain't going to happen, must have been insane.
Well, and most of that waiting was the Pentagon process, which I had absolutely no experience with and had no idea what kind of timeline. It was like every month, you know, you send an email just following up, what's going on? Oh, there's a meeting. I mean, it's the government. So for as quickly as radio has to function, the government is at a glacial pace. And never mind the fact that they're managing a war, right? There's shit going on. So when they finally say, okay, we're going to do this, and we got our body armor, we ordered all this gear, we got a bunch of amazing sponsors, and we designed T-shirts that were the exact uniform undershirt color so that the military guys would be able to wear the T-shirts under their uniforms and be in regs because we didn't want to get anybody in trouble. Then it was, okay, how are we going to do all of this? And then we found out about the shots.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Which right now, like, vaccinations is a huge taboo. You know, I'm going to get into an argument on Facebook. People are fighting with their families about getting vaccinations. You and I had to go and get 14 shots to go on this trip.
And those fucking malaria pills, like, that make you hallucinate. Like, when you stop taking malaria medicine, I don't know if anyone knows this, but you have the most vivid dream. I had a dream when I came back and I stopped taking that malaria medicine that you and I were skydiving, of course, because you skydive, right? But like, I had this horribly vivid dream about we're skydiving when we were in Iraq. Like, oh my God, I forgot about that. Holy shit.
So we had to start taking the malaria meds before we left. Because people think of Iraq as desert, but it's not. It's the cradle of civilization, and the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers go right through the middle of it. And there's a lot of water, and there's a lot of fucking mosquitoes there. And so we had to start taking this malaria medication before we even left. And I distinctly remember you coming into the studio because you worked on the other side of the building. Your office was on the other side of the building. And you came down to the studio, and your eyes were like saucers. And your pupils were like little pinholes. And you were like, hey, and I looked at you and you looked at me and we didn't even have to say anything because it was like, you, yeah. We were hallucinating in the middle of a work day, taking prescribed malaria medication.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that stuff was that. Listen, I don't know why people pay for synthetic drugs. Get yourself on some malaria medicine, like, fuck.
It was crazy. And it only lasted for a few days. And then coming off of it, like you said, it's all about your body ramping up the level of protection and then ramping down the level of protection when you stop taking them. But in that moment, I'm on the air, tripping my balls off going, can anybody tell? And I didn't want to tell anybody like the bosses. So you and I were just... You and I were just like there. Yeah, we were on the DL, just having our own little private hallucinating trip in the studio.
It was funny when we had that exchange with each other. You're right. No one said a word, but we both knew that we're not saying shit about this. Like, nothing's disrupting the apple cart right now. Like, hang on, you good? I'm good. You're good.
All we wanted to do was get on the plane, right? Because we were like, once we're on the plane, they can't stop us at that point. Once we get on the plane. So we get ready to go. The radio station sends the van, like the logoed out promotional vehicle, to take us to the airport and take all of our shit. And we had shipped at that point like cases of T-shirts and promotional pictures for me to autograph and all this stuff ahead of time because we couldn't take it on the plane with us. We had so much shit to take with us.
Too heavy, yeah.
Yeah, so all we were carrying on the plane was the equipment and the computers and stuff that we needed and the clothes that we needed, and we had to take our body armor with us.
Mm-hmm.
And because we had body armor, which isn't legal for people to just have and wear, the military had to put us on military orders. So whenever when you get activated in the military and the military says you have to go someplace, you're on military orders, they sent you a document that you carry with you that shows that you are being ordered by the military to go places. So you and I arrive in the WAF rock radio station vehicle at the airport with all of our shit. We go up to the counter and we go to check in and we're like, here's my ID. Here's my boarding pass. Here's my military orders. And we're standing there and you got a beard and I have purple hair and they're looking at us like, really?
Nah, this ain't happening. Sorry.
So you and I are like joking that we're like these CIA operatives. We're like trying to figure out what other people are thinking about what we're doing. Because we obviously were not in the military.
I thought someone thought we were maybe marshals or something, like some covert thing. I had this whole thing played out in my mind, but you're right. No one thought that we had orders to be on a plane with all the stuff that we had.
Yeah, it was bizarre. And we had carefully packed our carry-ons. We were not allowed to put our body armor on the carry-ons. So that was a leap of faith that the body armor was going to get there in the checked bags. But everything that was in our carry-ons was literally everything we could not live without over there. And that does not mean food and toothpaste. It was cameras, memory cards, chargers, computers, like that kind of stuff.
The satellite phones.
The satellite phone.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So I remember you and I being at Logan and savoring our iced coffee, which is a similar thing that I did with Mike 5 years later when I went to Afghanistan with him. And I just remember sitting there at the gate, like waiting to get on the plane. You and I barely knew each other. We had gotten to know each other through this process. And I'm like, I'm sitting here with this total stranger and we're getting on a plane to go to Iraq. What the fuck are we doing?
Oh my God, I'm looking at the book that you and I have. I think there's 2 in existence.
Yeah, so I made a photography book of all of our photos when we got home, and I wanted to have a book that I could take out to do like speaking engagements and stuff that people could see the pictures, even though all of these pictures are up on the Mistress Carrie Facebook page as a photo gallery, but I wanted you to have one of these books too. And so when we got home that Christmas, I made you one of these books. So you and I both have our respective books in front of us. And the picture of you and I at Logan with all of our shit, all these camo duffel bags. Yeah.
Oh my God. We had like, I can't even describe how much stuff we took, let alone how much stuff we didn't realize we had to try to bring back with us or move around between, Kuwait, Iraq, and like it didn't. I keep going back to it. I don't think it ever dawned on me, Carrie. Like I don't, for real. Like even to the point of all the shots and stuff. Like I'm like, yeah, we're just gonna go do this awesome thing. We're gonna go see our troops. We're gonna go. Like I don't know if it ever really dawned on me, like the extent of how much shit we actually put into this.
And the difference between the trip that you and I went on, which was in 2006, and 5 years later going to Afghanistan, obviously I had a better idea of what I was doing 5 years later. But if you go back and listen to the episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast called AAF to Afghanistan 9 years later, I sat down with my producer, Mike, the way that you and I are sitting down now. Mike and I had a different experience because we were embedded with the same guys, the same platoon of guys for the entire trip. you and I, every 3 to 4 days, had to pack up everything we brought with us and get moved to a different part of the country, become the new kids in school all over again, make friends with the troops we were embedded with. So when you're talking about all the shit we had to carry, we never got to just drop it and leave it and like operate out of our suitcases. Every few days we had to pack all this stuff up and get on a helicopter or another plane or like whatever and take it all with us. And it was cumbersome.
But you know, it was incredibly cumbersome, but somehow every step of the journey, we saw a AF or Mistress Carrie sticker.
It's
Remember
crazy.
when we were flying out of Anaconda, Margaritaville. It's 2:30 in the morning, 3 in the morning. We're on a plane trying to get out. They're being murdered.
Don't tell the story yet. We got to get there.
I'm sorry.
Don't tell because I want to go in chronological order, and that Balad story is a good story.
But yes, I won't fucking say shit. But every step of the journey, there was a Mistress Carrie sticker on something.
Well, that's because we had sent all those care packages for the years leading up to this trip. They were everywhere.
But we would. So I don't want to get too far ahead.
Yeah, don't jump ahead. All right, so you and I get on the plane in Boston.
Right.
We have to change planes in Heathrow.
Kuwait. Oh, Heathrow, that's right. Yeah.
And every time somebody said final destination, you and I would look at each other and we'd be like, Kuwait? Yeah, Kuwait, because that's when we got off the commercial flights. So the way that it was we went Boston to Heathrow to Kuwait City. Mm-hmm. Kuwait's airport was half commercial airport, half military base that obviously the Americans were running. And so our thing was get to Kuwait, get our bags, get through immigration, get our visas taken care of and all of that, which we had done through the embassy and all that. And then we were to leave the airport and there was a mall. Like this shopping plaza, and it's Kuwait, so it's like as beautiful and rich and every stereotype you can think about a rich oil country. And then there were going to be military personnel waiting for us to take us from the commercial side of the airport to the military side of the airport, and then they were going to take us to the military base.
Just find them, by the way.
So we had to find them because part of it was they weren't allowed to wear their uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking for these dudes in regular golf shirts and stuff, like
who we've never met.
We don't know what they look like, and everybody needs to remember that this is 2006. Nobody had iPhones. There was no we were not functioning with a modern day interweb social media 5G life.
You had just gotten MySpace, and I just irked into your top 8 because we're going on the trip together.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment. You made it in my MySpace top 8, Joe. That was big.
I was 7 and I took that. Whoever was 8, fuck them. But yeah, we were going to Iraq together. So
they pick us up. We find the guys. We were expecting them to be in uniform and they weren't. So we find the guys and they go to take us outside. We got the trolley at the airport. We got all the shit on it and we go outside and it was 124 degrees.
Yep.
And you and I just looked at each other because we had t-shirts and long pants on. And we just looked at each other and we were like, oh, fuck.
Right. And that's when they were telling us while we were getting our ride before, what was it, a C-12 or whatever, they were telling us if you see someone who is working, doing a regular job, they're not a Kuwaiti national because of the oil money that the Kuwaiti nationals get. And your only responsibility is to put money back into the community, right? And so, see that guy working over there? They're not a Kuwaiti national because
they're third country nationals, they call them.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So they take us over to this office, and they give us the PR brief. These are the guys that are the paper guys that have to read us the riot act about what to do, what not to do, what we're allowed to say and not say. And basically the instructions that they gave us were, you're obviously not allowed to give out classified information. mission information. You're not allowed to report on casualties because obviously of the notification process and whatever. And they were like, under no circumstances are you to resemble active military. So you're not allowed to wear uniforms. You're not allowed to do any of this stuff. So you and I just wore tan everything. We had like they looked like military uniforms, but they were khaki. They weren't camouflage. So that we had the same pockets and we had the same blouse tops and all that, but there were no emblems on them. There were no patches and it wasn't camouflage. And so they're reading us the riot act. Remember, we're sitting there and it was air conditioned. We were like, oh, this is nice. And we had been up for like 27 hours at this point. And we're like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, okay, well, this is what you got to do. And okay, are you guys ready? And we're like, okay, now what? And they said, well, we're going to put you on a Black Hawk. And we're going to fly you to Camp Buehring, which is a base in Kuwait, where a lot of the troops getting ready to go up into Iraq go through to get equipment delivered to them, to get acclimated to the climate, to get acclimated to the time change, all of that stuff. And we're like, okay, how long are we going to be there? And they were like 18 hours or something. Like, okay. So all of a sudden, we're like pushing our luggage cart out, and then all of a sudden, all these dudes in coveralls and stuff, the flight crew. And they're like, you guys don't travel light, do you? And they grabbed all our bags and we turned around and we're getting in this Black Hawk helicopter. And I remember the look you had on your face because you looked like a little kid that just saw Santa.
I remember the first time we got in those Black Hawks, I'm like, this is fucking awesome. I remember the show Airwolf, which was nothing to do with the military, but I was addicted to helicopters, and the fact that we're getting in a Black Hawk to like make our first maneuvers was like, oh, the guy hanging out the window with that giant 50 cal. Oh my God.
With the cool crew mask on that looks like Darth Vader. And like, we were like, oh my God, those guys were the Bosox, right?
Mm-hmm.
So their mission patches it looked like a Red Sox logo. And it was their job to kind of fly people in and out of, that were coming in and out of Kuwait from the airport and to get them onto the military bases. So we land in Camp Buehring and they're like, okay, you guys are going to sleep here tonight. And then we're going to coordinate air travel for you to get closer to the Iraqi border like tomorrow. But you guys are going to stay. And I slept in a like a quad room with female troops who had an extra bed in their room. Did you sleep in a crew room with a bunch of soldiers too? Where did you sleep? I don't even know.
I don't even remember, to be honest with you. I think I did, but it was one of those moments where, like you said, we had been up for so long that it was like, grab shut-eye while you can, wake up and move.
Yeah.
It seemed like barracksy to me, but like it was a moment to like recharge as quick as possible because we're going to be on it tomorrow. And this is the last time you're probably going to get any sort of decent sleep for a long time.
Yeah. And so the next thing we wanted to do was eat. So then they took us to the chow hall. And I remember there was a vehicle that had gotten blown up. And it was parked outside of the chow hall and it was covered with bumper stickers. And my bumper stickers were all over it because we had sent so many care packages overseas that there were bumper stickers on it. And I remember going into, now we had been on the air. We announced the trip about 3 weeks before we left. It was on our website. It was all over the air. Bands knew we were going. Everybody knew we were going. But again, this is 2006. Communication, internet with the troops is far better now than it was back then. And so what we realized is that other than the troops we had been directly communicating with, most of the military guys didn't know we were coming.
Yeah, no one knew we were coming. And in fact, it's really hard to hide purple hair, especially like where we were going. So you stuck out like a sore thumb in like the most incredible of ways. But we would be going somewhere and be like, Carrie, Carrie, and people just recognized, but no one knew we were coming, which was kind of the beauty of what we were doing. I mean, people knew who we were embedded with, but that surprise, that like excitement, that feeling of home for people who've been stationed there for so long and like hadn't been talked, because like you said, like you can kind of talk with family and stuff, but it's not like it is today. You know,
no, there was no FaceTiming. There was no, none of that. The internet. The difference between Iraq and Afghanistan in just 5 years for me, from 06 to 11, you and I basically, if we weren't on the satellite phone, everything that we were doing, we were recording to bring home with us on memory cards because they could not be sent through the internet because it wasn't powerful enough to be able to send these video files and stuff. And I remember walking into that chow hall, and there was a whole group of guys from Massachusetts. And we walked in, and they all just started yelling because they were like, is that Mistress? Like, it's not possible that Mistress Carrie from WAF in Boston just walked into the chow hall at Camp Buring in fucking Kuwait. And one of the other things that was awesome is that we always found a way to like be involved in these amazing impromptu gatherings. So do you remember the movie night that night?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I remember the picture from the movie night because there's like 50 something people in that picture. It was just a giant experience. And that was the first night that we had, I think we talked about it. We brought hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of t-shirts. We brought the AAF Boston to Baghdad t-shirts. And we literally went through 2-3 cases of t-shirts on our very first night at that movie night. And I remember barely being awake, but you sat there and you literally met hundreds and hundreds of people. Like you sat and spoke with everybody, and we were handing t-shirts to people, and they were just like, thank you so much for being here. I can't believe you're here. Like, what is and everyone was so inquisitive of what was going on. But we were still kind of under wraps, and we just kept going. We're doing Boston to Baghdad. Here's a t-shirt. Like, have a moment with, So yeah, it was shit.
So some of the guys from like the aviation unit, they were like, look, we do this movie night. We're going to hang a bed sheet off the side of a building, and we're going to steal a one-eye projector from one of the briefing rooms, and we're going to hook it up, and we're going to show, like, they had like a VCR, and they would hook up the one-eye projector, the VCR, and they would sit outside because at midnight it was like 98 degrees, and it was way more pleasant to be outside.
Cool at night.
And they said, we're going to watch movies. And then they had a barbecue. They got a bunch of hot dogs. Remember the Kuwaiti dogs?
No.
So Kuwaiti dogs were, and I don't know why I remember stuff like this, but I just do. But Kuwaiti dogs were nacho cheese and jalapenos on a hot dog. And they were like, we're going to make you Kuwaiti dogs. And we were like, okay, like, all right. If you want to feed us hot dogs, like, that's totally fine. So we sat outside as late as we could. And like, you and I both had this agreement that like, we need to stay awake as long as possible the whole time we're here, because before you know it, the trip's going to be over. And what the fuck is the point of sleeping the way through it? And if these guys are there and they want to meet us, then we want to be there to meet them. And so we were hanging out with the aviation guys, eating the Kuwaiti dogs, and guys from the 101st who had heard through the grapevine that we were there were walking down like the dirt paths in between like the trailers and stuff going, Mistress Carrie, we know you're here. Where are you? And then all of a sudden, all these dudes who were on their way into Iraq, infantry guys, like on their way into Iraq, and they just heard that we were on base, and they came looking for us.
Was that the hockey team? Or am I confusing
that? No,
that
was once we got into Baghdad. The hockey guys were once we got into Baghdad.
I confused it because it was like 22:30. Everyone there's a picture that you have that you should post with this. Everyone is wearing those t-shirts. Yeah. They're holding up the autographed pictures that you have. It's the 101 guys. And they're literally, those moments are the moments that make you realize that we're doing the right things for the right reasons, right? It made you understand that we were there to bring a semblance of home, a semblance of normalcy, and it really was damn.
So one of the guys that was in the 101st was a Mass State Trooper. I'm still friends with him. And he became the casualty officer for one of the guys that I met in Afghanistan that passed away. I still know him to this day. There's a lot of people we met in Iraq that I still keep in touch with. We obviously made some really good friends, but we met a lot of people that I have then bumped into later in life and still keep in contact with. And it's just crazy that he was one of the guys that was walking through Camp Buring like, Mistress Carrie, we know you're here. Where are you?
Yeah, word spread pretty quick when we were doing stuff.
So then we finally got to bed like in the middle of the night, and we got up the next day, and it was like, okay, today's the day we're going to move out. And we're going to, the plan was we were going to leave Camp Buring with the aviation guys, and they were going to fly us via helicopter to a base just on the border of Iraq.
Right.
And we were going to get dropped off with the Air Force for just this leg of the journey because we couldn't fly in a helicopter into Iraq because they needed to get us into Baghdad, and we had to be at a high enough altitude to get over what they considered the quote green zone so that they could land at the Baghdad International Airport, or what you and I refer to as BIAP. And
that was combat landing, right?
Combat landing, yeah. So we had to rely on the Air Force a couple of times in this journey to get us on a fixed wing aircraft or a plane versus a helicopter with the Army. So you and I pack up all of our stuff. We go to breakfast at the Chow Hall, and they're like, hey, the USO is setting up a stage. Yeah. There's going to be a concert. And so we were like, no way, really? That's cool. Can you show us where it is? And they're like, yeah, the stage is over here, whatever. And we walk into this dirt lot in the middle of Camp Buring, and we find out that it's Drowning Pool.
Bingo. Let's do this.
And I'm like, hold on a second. Drowning, like, that's a band that I know because of the rock station that I'm on in Boston. So we go walking over by the stage, and we bump into the guys from Drowning Pool who are from Texas, so they have the obvious accents. And they're looking at me like, I know
why are you here?
But why are you here? And they were like, are you here with the USO too? And I think it needs to be noted that when these artists go on USO tours, first of all, they do it at their own expense. They pay for everything themselves. But the USO kind of takes care of the logistics and stuff. And the USO artists are handled like VIPs, and they're not put in harm's way, and they're protected, and they go from base to base. What you and I were doing as embedded reporters was not that. And when I tell people I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, they say, oh, were you there with the USO? And it's a noted difference because of some of the things that you and I experienced during the trip of kind of ending up in harm's way. Because the guys from Drowning Pool were like, are you here with the USO? And we're like, no, we're actually embedded. We're getting ready to head up into Iraq.
Like, what?
And they were like, wait, what do you mean? And they said, well, we're going to Baghdad. We're playing a USO show in Baghdad on September 11th. And we said, hold on. We looked at our itinerary of like the places, and we were like, I think we're going to be in Baghdad on 9/11 too. And they said, well, if you're there, you got to come to the show. And so that was like, we took some pictures, and that was like the extent of our time with Drowning Pool. And then it was like, okay, we're getting ready to go.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll see you guys.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you guys.
We'll put it on our list to do.
So then we get on these helicopters, and like they have like painted faces, and like these Blackhawks are freaking mean and awesome looking and
incredible. And
I remember the guys that dropped us. So we got on these Blackhawks at Camp Buring, and they flew us to a place called Ali Al Salim, which is right on the border of Iraq. And I remember the Blackhawk guys saying to us, like, we'll see you on the way back out of the country. When you guys come back out of Iraq, we're going to be the ones that are here to get you.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful.
Which was super comforting, by the way.
Yeah. And like, they were like, just be careful. Like, you guys are going in the shit now. Like, be careful. And I remember the hugs that they gave us. And there was a different hug when you arrive and they're like, hey, thanks for getting here, than the hug you get when they're saying goodbye to you, knowing you're on your way into Iraq.
It's that, hey, buddy, how are you? Versus like, hey, man, be good, right?
Yeah.
You know, when someone looks at you and is like, hey, be good, take care of yourself, that 100%, because it was more of like when we got there, it was like friends, and these are like family now, telling you like, keep your head up, pay attention. We'll see you in a little bit.
So Ali Al Salim is this little itty bitty base with an airstrip. And the unit that was there manning the aircraft were from Alaska. And we walk in, you and me with the purple hair. The people from Alaska were like, what are you guys doing here? And we were like, yeah, we're here to get a plane to go into Baghdad. And they're just looking at us like, what? So we hung out with them for a couple hours, and they were like, enjoy the air conditioning. We took some pictures with these guys. And, one of them asked me if the tattoo around my arm went all the way around because he thought maybe I was a wimp and like didn't get it all on the underneath my arm. And they were like, okay, your plane is getting ready to get here. And like, I was expecting like a C-130, like one of those big giant planes you see in the movies with the netting on the sides and whatever. And this little plane lands. And it needs to be noted, you mentioned it earlier, that I'm a skydiver. The first plane I ever jumped out of was a King Air. And it's this dual propeller plane and whatever. And when they took us outside, it was the same plane I had jumped out of as a skydiver that landed. And it said United States Air Force down the side. And I was expecting like, not like a B-2 bomber, but like I was expecting a big, giant military plane.
Yeah, but that was a C-12, and it was a 2-star general C-12. So like we were in royalty.
Yeah.
Like I know you jumped out of shit, but that was someone's legit plane, right?
Yeah. So we get all of our bags and all the T-shirts and everything, and they're legitimately like, we don't know if we're going to have enough room in the plane for you two. And it's just the two pilots. There's no stewardess or drink service. It's the two pilots, you and I, and all our shit. And we're like, nobody else is getting on this plane. And they're like, no, they sent us here just to get you guys. And by the way, this is a 2-star general's plane. This is how the 2-star flies around. So no monkey business. Like just sit down, put your seatbelt on. Don't fucking touch anything. So we get in the plane. We took some pictures with the pilots and stuff. And we are instructed about altitude and about why it is that we needed to be flown on this plane to get into Baghdad. Because, so imagine, when you fly into any airport, you gradually descend. And as you get lower to the ground and closer to the airport, you become vulnerable when you're flying into and out of a war zone. So imagine, if you will, we're in this little plane. There's no wall in between us and the pilot. They're just there. And they're like, we're going to do what's called a combat landing, where we are going to fly over Baghdad International Airport at 10,000 feet. And when we know what is underneath us is friendly airspace, we are then going to dive straight down from 10,000 feet, and we're going to land. Because we can't gradually descend because someone will shoot us down. This was the first moment where I was like, shit's real now.
It felt like I was skydiving with you when we just nosedived. Like literally, we've all been in commercial planes, right? They just buckle your seats, don't get up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, your ears pop a little bit, but it's like not a big deal.
Nah, they nosedived on us, and literally you could see everything just pushed to the back of the plane because it was a straight drop into where we were going. I'm like, all right, Carrie, well.
I remember them yelling from the cockpit, seat belts, and you and I were tightening them as tight as they would go. And we had been taking selfies, which selfies weren't a thing back then, but we were just taking our cameras and like taking pictures of each other because we were like, we're in a general's plane. Like, this is crazy. We're flying into Iraq. Like, this is insane. And then I remember all the stuff getting pushed to the tail of the plane because we were descending so fast. And you and I put our hands up like we were on a roller coaster, and we were like, woo! And I remember the pilot, one of them turned and just looked at us, and half was like, what the fuck? And half was kind of laughing. Because the 2-star general didn't make the woo noises when he landed.
No, they were so happy to have people on their plane that were enjoying their life, but they were also like, yo, you know what you're getting into, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was that 50-50, enjoy it while you can, because fuck, man.
When I talk about this trip to Iraq, this story we're about to tell is one of the stories people ask me all the time about whether or not it's true, and they can't believe that this actually happened. So while you and I were getting ready to go over there, we shipped most of the T-shirts and the stuff to the guys we were embedded with in Baghdad. And the guys we were embedded with in Baghdad were a small unit, and they were the 126th Military Historical Detachment. So basically what these guys were tasked to do is they would go out, and they were infantry guys, so they were grunts, but they would go out and they would have to document stuff, battles, casualties, armament, all of this kind of stuff for posterity, for medals, for whatever. And there were only a half a dozen of them. There was a small unit of guys, and these guys would go out all around the country. So they had been everywhere. They had been in harm's way, but they were guys from Mass. And we had been emailing back and forth through their secure email, kind of coordinating logistics. So when you and I land in the general's plane in Bayap after this combat landing, a couple Humvees roll out onto the tarmac to come and meet us. One Humvee had like the pickup truck back to take all of our shit. And then the other guys were the guys from the unit that we had been communicating with. And the major was there. Mm-hmm. And then guys that we'll end up talking about a lot, Nick and Sap. Guys that we became very close with and to this day, obviously, are still close with. And they drove out to say hi to us, to introduce themselves. We're the guys you've been emailing with or whatever, and then put us in the truck. And they were taking us to a meeting with the commanding general, who was a 1-star at the time, I believe, that was on base. So we take pictures with the pilots. And as we're walking away from the plane, there's a group of soldiers walking towards the plane. And I know enough about the military to know that the person not carrying anything is usually in charge. It also needs to be said that we, at this point in time in September of 2006, the military was in the middle of changing uniforms, going from the tan, desert, swirly camouflage to what they refer to as the digicam, which are more like the green computerized. Yeah. So the swirly camouflage, the rank was sewn onto the collars of the uniform, whereas on the digicam, the rank is worn in the center of the chest on like a Velcro patch. Mm-hmm. So I had been used to looking for the rank on the collars of the uniforms. And as it is with most things, new equipment, the better equipment starts at the top and trickles down. So obviously the generals and whatever, they got the new stuff first. So the group of people, soldiers walking towards us, are wearing the new uniforms where the rank is in the center of the chest as opposed to the collar. I say this because I did not notice the rank of the person not carrying anything at the time. And as we're walking in 125-degree heat with the major, who is the commander of this unit we're about to be embedded with, and all the guys are humping our gear off the plane and throwing it in the truck, I believe what I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but here's my 15-year recollection. Hey, the AC is kicking on that thing. Thanks for the ride. Or something along those lines. And then I put my hand up like Tom Brady on the sideline of a football game for a high five.
High five. That you're 100% correct. But who were you doing that to?
Well, first of all, it needs to be said that I received the high five, unlike Tom Brady on the sideline of most football games. And I, in that moment, high-fived a 2-star commanding general in a war zone. And it was all in emotion. They were walking towards the plane. We're walking away from the plane. I called him dude, I believe. Like, dude, the AC is kicking on. The AC is kicking on that thing. That plane is badass.
Yeah.
And then he high-fived me, at which point the major, who we had known for 25 seconds at this point, said, "You are going to get me demoted. You cannot..."
Pure panic.
"You cannot high-five a 2-star general in a war zone." And he starts pointing at his chest. 1-star, 2-star, 1-star, 2-star. And as the major, who's now sweating worse than he would have because of the temperature outside, the general climbing the stairs to get into the aircraft turns around and says, "Hey, you took good care of my plane, right?" And I said, "Absolutely, sir." And he says, "Take good care of my guys, too." And the major is now Casper the Friendly Ghost White.
And it was all good.
And the major, and the general just waves.
Yeah.
And got in the plane. Meanwhile, I didn't notice that the soldier carrying the general's bag was a lieutenant colonel or a colonel. So this wasn't like a bunch of just privates that were with.
No.
These were the general's security detail, his assistant, and they're all trying not to laugh. Because the general just high-fived a purple-haired girl who just came off of his private plane. And now the major of the unit, and meanwhile, Sap and Noftel are laughing.
Oh my God.
People ask me all the time if it's true if I high-fived a 2-star general.
It is 100% true, and you didn't think twice about it, and neither did he. There was nothing more than "Yeah, motherfucker, this is my plane. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Awesome." It was the most incredible moment that I saw. Well, yeah, top 3 while we were there, 100%.
That was a moment. But it was true, and I'm glad I had you there. One of the many reasons why I was glad I had you there, because I had a witness.
Well, I can 100% verify, hand to God, 100% true. It happened. And you have a really good memory on how your recollect is of how it went down, because that's identical to what
I can't tell you how many times I've told these stories because of the speaking engagements and stuff that I get asked to do because of these trips, because it's such an anomaly for people like you and I to end up in the places we ended up at, that for years doing the veterans advocacy work that I've done and the work with the military, I have told these stories so many times that in some ways it happened in my mind yesterday. And when I see these guys and bump into them at places, I hug them like I saw them yesterday, because they are so important to me and such an important part of my life that, you said it, this trip changed the way you looked at everything. It had that profound effect on me too.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No. I was just agreeing with you. It literally changed everything. Every view, every concept, every preconceived notion that you have, it changed that. When you talk about people not believing your story about that, your preconceived notion is the guy's going to tear you up, right? But that was not the case. And it kind of set the tone almost for why and how we're there and what we were doing, because we were there on a mission. We had our own mission to be there on. And the fact that out of the gate, everyone was accepting of that, whether it was, subconscious or not, was the tone for what we did.
And we were these outlaws, because it was we don't have to wear the uniform. We don't have to salute people. We're not, but yet we were with these units. So it was like we were the weird cousin visiting from out of town.
and we were being vouched for, right? Major was yeah, these guys are good, right? We wouldn't have gotten away with it, I'm sure, if we were just anybody.
So we go and meet the commanding general, who wanted to welcome us to Baghdad, and he was the commander of the base. And then we got taken to this trailer that can only be described as if you've ever seen a big construction site. They bring in a trailer for offices. So
work trailer.
So that's what they had for us to it was an office, and they were like, we got you some cots, and you guys are just going to sleep in here. And we were like, okay, cool. And so we go in there, and we're like setting up our stuff. And one of the funniest things, and I guess you could look at it as creepy, but it's not. It was just funny. That as we were going through our stuff, right, the guys that we're embedded with are sitting there with us, and we're getting to know them, and we're kind of shooting the shit and talking about like what led up to us getting there and what had happened to us on the journey so far. And I had brought sheets with me. And I had no idea we were going to be sleeping or whatever, but my dad was a firefighter when I was growing up, and in the bunk room where all the firefighters slept, they were all twin beds. And they were responsible to bring their own sheets. So the only twin bed sheets that anybody has are their kids, right? So you go into the bunk room of pretty much any firehouse, and you're going to see little kids' cartoon sheets on the firefighters' beds because
everywhere.
That's what fits the bed. So I had gotten Finding Nemo sheets because I did not have twin bed sheets, and I didn't know what kind of bed I was going to be sleeping on. And I figured, okay, well, at least I'll have sheets so that I can cover up. I'm the only girl. If we're sleeping on a cot, I'll have a sheet to put over, like whatever. And I'm taking stuff out of my luggage, and the sheets came out. And we had been told, pack all of your stuff in plastic bags because everything is so dusty, and you're going to need plastic bags for your electronics. You're going to need plastic bags because even if you haven't worn the clothes, they're going to get dirty. So if you keep them in plastic bags, like big, like freezer bags, Ziploc bags and stuff, you'll keep stuff cleaner. And I go to like try and make my bed. And the guys were like, did you wash those sheets before you got here?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I just washed them. Like, they're clean. I haven't even slept on them yet. And they're like, can we smell them?
It was you would think someone who hasn't seen, well, I can't say you haven't seen a woman, but like you are stationed, right? The thing that they want the most is to smell clean sheets.
They wanted like that laundry smell. And what you and I realized early on, and the same thing happened to me in Afghanistan. And again, these are the experiences that I could warn Mike about 5 years later. It's so dry and dusty there that you lose your sense of smell within a couple days. And unless something is incredibly pungent, good or bad, you don't smell it because everything is dried out in your nose and dusty. And because my sheets were so freshly laundered and they smelled like dryer sheets, there were these heavily armed grown men in uniform huddled around sniffing my sheets.
Yeah, taking turns huffing off of your sheets.
Which would be, I guess, so socially awkward in any other instance. But when you're in a war zone and you know your life's in the hands of these guys, you're like, you want to smell the sheets? Like, go ahead.
Yeah, man, whatever you need. Like if this is going to help me out in the long run, take a big rip. Go for it.
So one of the other things about where we were, anybody that's a veteran that spent any time in Iraq, Bayat, the area, the green zone, that part of Baghdad is a massive facility. Unlike Afghanistan, where the U.S. military was there in conjunction with the Afghan government, we had ousted Saddam Hussein and were therefore the de facto government of Iraq at this time. And this base is huge, massive in scale. And where we were in this trailer, there were not a lot of facilities around, period, but there were definitely no facilities around for women because this was an infantry area, so this was just all guys. And I obviously was not going to be allowed to go in to where the guys would shower and stuff because that would just be a disaster. So there was always accommodations that needed to be made about me needing to be walked to the bathroom, me needing to be walked to the shower because I had to go to a female latrine, and that this was far. And even though we were in the green zone, I had to be escorted all the time because at this point in 2006, journalists were being kidnapped.
Yeah.
And there was no bigger target than an American journalist, especially a female purple-haired one.
Mm-hmm.
So I had someone with me 24 hours a day. And
it wasn't me.
Yeah, and it was a guy. And the other thing was you're in the middle of a desert, so you're on water rations because any water that's on these bases is getting trucked in. So taking 15-minute showers is not acceptable behavior because water, clean, potable water to be able to clean yourself with is a commodity. There's bottled water everywhere, but actually going to a place with plumbing to brush your teeth or take a shower, and you would feel instantly dirty 5 seconds after you took a shower. But in that 5 seconds of showering, you had no dirt on you and whatever. And so the ability to like have any privacy at all, you and I didn't get any, but it was a little more invasive for me because I was a girl and like I felt like an outlier a little bit because these extra accommodations had to be made for me.
Yeah, combat showers on a base at 2:30 in the morning with people who are unwilling to leave you alone just for your own safety. It becomes like a really awkward situation.
So I had my iPod that I had filled with music and stuff because, again, it's not like we're streaming, Netflix in 2006. And I had put a bunch of new music on it, and I bribed Nick, who ended up being like my primary bodyguard while we were in Iraq, who ironically 5 years later just happened to be in the same unit I was embedded with in Afghanistan, which is just crazy. But I bribed Nick. I was like, can I give you my iPod so that you can listen to music while I'm in the shower? Because there's the little things. You're like, okay, well, you've been in a shower. Like, what if I fart and this guy hears it? Like, I'm in the bathroom. What if he hears me pooping? Like, he's just outside the door. Like, try to poop when you know someone's 6 inches from you on the other side of a wall waiting for you to be done. And it's 2 a.m. and it's 100 and something degrees. And so I was like, can I give you my iPod? You can listen to music. And like, do you mind if I take an extra, like I have to be able to brush my hair. Like I have to put conditioner in it and then I'm going to braid it and it's never going to, I'm not putting makeup on or anything, but like, can I just have an extra 2 minutes? Like, can I please? And he was like, give me the iPod, like whatever. But you become incredibly close to people in this instance because they were asking us, did you pee today? What color was your urine? Have you moved your bowels today? Like I just met you an hour ago, bro.
The color guide they had on the tarmac for not being able to work outside because it was too hot, they also had that color guide for your piss. Like legit, like, are you golden to brown today? You haven't drank enough water. Have you taken a shit yet today? We need to make sure you're eating more. Like everything about it. They literally watched every facet of what we were doing.
Well, dehydration's a huge thing.
Yeah, of course.
And having 2 unarmed American journalists embedded with you and taking up seats in a convoy in a truck, we're an automatic liability. And then we can't afford to be the ones that pass out because we're dehydrated, because now we're even more of a liability, which is why you and I took it so seriously to wear our body armor, to get used to all of this stuff. Because we knew that we were going to get rushed through being acclimated and that we were going to end up with these units and be on the road and going. And we were afraid to be the pariahs. We were afraid to be a burden.
Yeah, neither. We were so dead serious about it because the last thing we wanted to do was be on this mission of trying to like find people from Boston and talk with them and bring a little bit of life back or home to them, and then be the person that's got to be carried out or taken to like the medic or has to be shuttled somewhere else. And we didn't want people having to fawn over us either. Like there was no like any special, like let's treat something different, although, Nick and team would not really allow that, right?
Yeah.
But like,
and we also didn't want to get sent home. Like we were also kind of afraid we were going to do something that was going to make them send us home early.
Well, I mean, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but when we were at, was it Abu Ghraib? Like I was ready, man. You could have put papers in front of me. Like I was ready to fucking sign up, man. I had been there long enough. I was feeling it. Like, let's do this thing. I'm here for the long haul.
Within 2 to 3 days of being in Baghdad, Joe went from being Joe to being Combat Joe.
Yeah.
Which we still lovingly refer to you as, because if there had been a recruiter there, you would have signed your life away right then. You became a different person within 48 hours of touching Iraqi soil.
Yeah, I was ready to go. I think I like the structure, right?
Yeah.
I kind of like, but we're doing a lot of cool shit too. Like, so I was ready to go. I was on like mission sensitive. I'm ready to do this. And I don't want to say it was a lot of fun because it was, but like you could have put, a recruiter in front of me and I probably would have signed up for life.
One of the things we had to do that next morning was we had to get briefed on how to go on a convoy. And I grew up in a family of firefighters and Navy sailors, so there weren't a lot of guns around. And guns were something that always made me nervous. They don't anymore, but they did back then. Wrong place to be when you have a fear of guns is in a war zone, because everybody's got them and they take them with them everywhere and they sleep with them and they're on the table while they're eating breakfast. And so we had to go to a briefing the next morning where it was explained to us the tribal kind of politics that were at play around where we were in Iraq. And they needed to brief us on how convoys work, where we were going to be in what truck in the convoy formation. And because we were going to be traveling in Humvees that are armored, they're incredibly heavy. The door on a Humvee is like 1,000 pounds. And so you had to be able to open and close the door. It's called combat locking the door of the Humvee. And you had to be able to do it yourself because you had to be able to prove that if you got hit by an IED or there was an emergency and you had to get out of the vehicle, we had to be able to show the military we could handle it on our own. Again, not being a liability. And if we did not pass this test after this briefing, we were going to be left behind on this convoy because we had to show them that we could go. Meanwhile, it's 120 something degrees. We're wearing our body armor. The ammo pouches on our body armor are filled with cameras, memory cards, microphones, recording equipment, satellite phones, just electronics. There were just wires everywhere. And I remember you and I getting in this instruction, and we were sitting there as we were about ready to be tested. And we were like, we can't fuck this up.
Yeah.
And that door is heavy. And you were like, just fucking throw your arm into it. Just throw your shoulder, hip check that thing. Do what you got to do to open that door. Show them that you can open it so we can go on this convoy.
Well, they weren't looking at me. I mean, they wanted you to make sure you could do it. Like, right. I mean, they wanted me to do it, but they kept looking at you.
They weren't worried that you were going to be able to pull it off. But for me, they were like, I don't know if she's going to be able to open this door.
Yeah. And the second that you threw it right open, they're like, oh, we're good to go. You're a boss. You got this shit.
The other thing that we had to do was we had to be instructed on how to help hand ammunition in a firefight.
Yeah.
And these are some of the moments, like the combat landing and the general's plane, that in these moments, they are small realizations that while you're high-fiving a general, and that's funny, and while you're giving Nick your iPod so that he doesn't hear you pooping, these are funny things. But this trip went from one pendulum swing to the other side, meaning now you're in this incredibly real scenario where they are saying, okay, if we hit an IED, this is what we do. If the truck is on fire, this is what you do. If the truck in front of us hits an IED and is on fire, this is what we're going to do. And if we get into a firefight, the gunner is going to need ammo. That now becomes your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very sobering conversation.
And to that extent, if he gets hit, how to pull him down and pull him out and how to reload that 50 cal and how you might have to be the person in charge of that. And you better be prepared to do so.
When I tell people this part of the story, this is, again, one of the stories that they look at me and they go, there's no fucking way. And they were like, look, you guys are not in the military, but your ass is in a seat. And everybody whose ass is in a seat has a job. And if your gunner goes down and we need that gun, you better be able to figure it the fuck out. And so the first gun that I ever held in my own hands and learned how to load was a 50 cal.
And they showed us the size hole that puts in something, which was even more impressive of you doing that, right?
Well, we never got to fire him. I want to be clear.
No, of course. But
we were
they
briefed on
showed you.
emergency procedures, and that was one of the emergency procedures. And they were like, by the way, don't point it at anything you don't want to die, because this is the hole it puts in things.
Mm-hmm.
But point it at something you want to die and pull the trigger and kill it.
Mm-hmm. And make sure you're positive about it.
Make sure that it's dead and keep shooting it until it's dead. And I remember that day and the convoy. And one of the things we had to do is we had to go to a different part of Baghdad, and we had to get our credentials. We had to get these IDs that had biometric data on it and our fingerprints and our press credentials, because we had to have them once we left the unit in Baghdad to be able to get on aircraft and all of this other stuff. To be able to travel the way we traveled, we needed this ID. And in order to do it, we had to go through some squirrely places to get to where we needed to go, which is why we needed to go on the convoy. And the idea that that's what we were doing, I look back at now and I'm like, thank fucking God we never were responsible for taking control of that 50 cal.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in a moment, I'm sure, but thank God we didn't have to be in that situation. Thank God.
I would like to think that you and I would have risen to the occasion, because we took everything so seriously and paid such close attention. But that would have sucked if we ended up in that situation.
I just remember Greg standing, because he was on the 50, and them telling us, like, don't just grab him by the knee, but grab him by the belt buckle on the waist to pull him down if you need to. And if you feel like he needs to come down, just pull him down and be ready to get on it. And this is how you make sure that it's loaded and cocked and ready to go. Like, here's the slide here. I remember so vividly them going through that and how, like, dead serious we were about it.
Yeah, there was no joking around. That would have been so disrespectful in our view. Like, there were times to joke. This was not one.
Yeah. No, not at all.
So then we ended up going to the embassy, which is where we needed to go and get our IDs and get photographed, and got all the paperwork that we had, and we had our orders and all that. And they took us to the parade grounds, which you referenced earlier, mm-hmm. which is this famous image in history of Saddam Hussein kind of inspecting the Republican Guard and standing up at this, like, podium in this pavilion with a giant gun in his hand, like firing rounds off one-handed. And there were these crossed swords. And anyone that served in the Iraq War, if you were anywhere close to Baghdad at any point, you took a picture in front of these crossed swords, which was a monument built to brag about beating Iran in the Iran-Iraq War.
Hands of victory.
And so they were like, we want to take you over there so that we can walk you around and kind of take some pictures and stuff. And part of the memorial was like hundreds of helmets that were like used to pave paths in the ground. And we found out that they were actually Iranian soldiers' helmets, and every one of them had a bullet hole in it. And they used the helmets to, like, pave the ground like cobblestones.
And I think the reason they told us was it's the bottom of the foot in that culture is super disrespectful. So the fact that you could step and march on top of your enemies was like the worst possible thing that you could possibly do to disrespect someone. So the parade grounds and the hands of victory and all of that, you had to go in by stepping over your enemies, which was like the ultimate FU to do to someone.
And I remember some of the guys that we had picked up along the way from other units that were like, yeah, we'll go on this convoy and kind of protect you guys and like whatever. And they were like, well, we're going to take you to the parade grounds. We're going to take you into the building so you can stand where Saddam Hussein stood and take some pictures like Saddam did. Here's my rifle. Take pictures. And so you and I have all these amazing photos of the parade grounds and like looking like wannabe badasses.
Yeah, that's when we were no longer fobbits, right? We longer
left the wire.
Were on the fob. Yeah,
that's right. Anybody that, a fob is a forward operating base. And if you call someone a fobbit in the military, I don't mean to be repetitive to people that have served, but to any civilians that don't understand the lingo, if you call somebody a fobbit, it's an insult that they never leave the wire, that they never left the base, they never see action, they're pencil pushers, they're whatever. And it's an insult if you call somebody a fobbit. And so when we left the wire, they told us in the truck, like, okay, you guys nobody can ever call you a fobbit now.
That was when we became men and women, right?
That's right. That's when you became Combat Joe for real.
100%. I grew that day.
You did. As a man, you grew that day. And so we have all these amazing pictures of like us holding these guns. And like when you look at the pictures of Saddam Hussein from history, and then you realize that me and you, the idiots that we are, stood in the same place years later, it was very sobering and kind of crazy that like what the fuck are we doing here?
Well, I think you're underscoring for people that don't know that image. There's a couple images, and two of them we visited, and we'll talk about the other one in a second. But there's two giant images of Saddam Hussein that really stood the test of time, and one is with him of that rifle at the parade ground, like holding it in the air. That's one of those infamous like on for eternity images of him, and we were able to visit that, as well as another spot that I think we'll probably talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
So
we get our credentials, and now we're like basically going around looking for soldiers and troops from Massachusetts, and that's where we bumped into the guys that had found a way to get some hockey sticks and some deck hockey balls. And they were like, yeah, those guys are from Massachusetts. Of course they are, because they're playing hockey. So we were able to stop and like give guys shirts and visit with them for 5 minutes and give them bumper stickers. And we had these black and white pictures for me to autograph and be able to just give them a little something to, hey, can we take some pictures? We took a lot of pictures. And, one of the things that you did, obviously you made the trip happen by going with me. But you were that person that was always yes, give me your camera and I'll take that photo of you. Because if I'm going to go and take pictures, somebody has to take the pictures. And that behind the scenes person that is willing to kind of keep track of the phone calls I'm supposed to make and the interviews I'm supposed to do and the photos that need to get taken. And anytime I might get a little overwhelmed, you were there to kind of get me grounded and go, well, don't forget, we need to because I was making phone calls and doing interviews and all these other radio stations and TV stations around the country. And so you'd go, hey, don't forget, we're on Boston time. That's 8 hours from now. Like, we need to get this done. We need to get this done. And then every once in a while, I would do the same with you and be like, hey, let me take your picture. Like, you need to have pictures too, because otherwise we're going to get home and you're not going to have any photos of yourself.
That's part of the gig, right? I don't know if I'd done a bunch of on-air stuff and promo stuff, obviously, before we went, but I don't know if I ever really produced things. But that's why we're there, to stay on track. That's how I had it in my mind, like I knew we were going to get our pictures, but I was living through the moment of a lens. I was living through, it meant more to me to make sure that we were talking to the people that we were talking to, that we're taking advantage of the fact that we're there, from like talking to other radio stations, talking to television, all that shit. Like that was my thing. And, we just so happened to have a bunch of fun pictures of us.
Yeah.
That came out of it.
So then it's the morning of 9/11. And we know that later on that night that Drowning Pool is playing a USO show in Baghdad on the base. And we get told that there's a unit of guys from Massachusetts that we were going to go and visit. The guys that we were embedded with, the 126 military historical guys, Nick, Sapp, those guys, weren't allowed to come with us. And we were basically supposed to get driven to this secure compound and that we would be escorted and that special permission had been granted. And even the major from the unit that we were embedded with was not allowed to escort us past the perimeter. And so we were like, what's going on? And they're like, these guys don't get to do anything. They don't get to leave this compound. They work 12 hours and then they're off for 12 hours. And we want you to be able to go and visit these guys because these guys never get to do anything cool. And so we were like, okay. And so when we started telling our guys where we were going, they were like, no shit. So you mentioned it earlier. So Abu Ghraib was the prison base that got into all kinds of trouble with the harassing of the insurgents and the dog collars and all of that stuff. Well, they needed a prison to be able to hold the bad guys. And so it became this place called Camp Cropper. And it just so happened that Massachusetts troops were serving as the prison guards, basically. And they were in this incredibly secure compound and nobody could get in there. And they pulled some strings and said, we want you guys to go and visit these guys. You're only allowed to take certain pictures. Be very, very careful. This is classified stuff. There's really bad guys there. We left there and were told later that there was a stint of time that Saddam Hussein was actually a resident there, but it's not something that could get talked about while we were actually inside the walls. But they escorted us in there. And not only that, but someone had sent out for a giant cooler of steaks and like vegetables and stuff to make salads so that we could have a barbecue with these guys to do something nice for them because they never got any kind of extra perks or special treatment. And they were, in fact, up close and personal with the worst guys, the guys that were actually over there fighting. The actual terrorists that they were capturing were all in these walls. And so when they told the major, like, you can't even go in, like, and you and I are just like, okay, now we're going in with no one we know. We've become close with these guys that we're embedded with now. And we go in there, and I just remember how grateful and gracious the guys at Camp Cropper were.
I remember the stories from there. Like, I remember them telling us stuff about like the people who were there, right? Like they were not scared of assault rifles. I don't know if you remember this story, but they would tell us that people were not scared of assault rifles, but they were scared to death of a pistol.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the regime would walk up to people and there'd be a line of them and they would just tap someone on the head. And if that person was tapped, they would get shot with a pistol, dead, right where they stood.
And Uday and Qusay, Saddam Hussein's sons, got off on executing people with small arms fire at point blank range with an audience.
Yep. And they would make these like stands that were meant to be like you would hang and the floor would drop out on you, but they were steel or metal and they would light fires under it so that they would never end up like they would never kill the person, but the person would have to jump because of the fire burning under them to hang themselves. And I remember those stories because that's what used to happen there before we were able to instill some sort of semblance of like, not that, right? And they told us all these stories about all these crazy things that had happened there before we were ever involved. And that stuck out to me like a sore thumb, like instantly that stuff was happening.
And the fact that these guys were local guys, sharing these stories through interpreters, hearing stories about how like young boys, there were like that some of the terrorists were trying to smuggle young boys into the prisons, trading. If there was a younger insurgent, they would trade him for cigarettes and he would be assaulted. And like, it was just the most horrifying stuff that you would hear. And these guys, this is what they were dealing with day in and day out.
Yeah, and that's what the people who were being held there were used to, right? So like there was no recourse or repercussion for the people that were working in the prison. They didn't. There were it didn't matter, right? So they were always constantly in harm's way. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm a prison guard now. Like, it was not like that. They were constantly in harm's way because there was no recourse for anything.
That prison became a target because that's where all the high-level insurgents were.
Mm-hmm.
So the terrorists that weren't captured were always trying to figure out how they could free them.
Mm-hmm. And so it was always a hot spot. They were always on alert, and then they had to deal with stuff from the interior. They didn't take us through their actual tactical drills, but they allowed us to, like, they had the setups for practice, and we had the beanbag and stuff. I know Combat Joe started happening a little before that, but the second we're able to fire those beanbag guns, and I felt really good about how accurate I was, that's when I probably would have stayed with those guys for a long time.
They had these non-lethal guns that have been used by law enforcement in the United States, and people argue whether or not they're legal, or they're dangerous or whatever, but they would use them for crowd control when they needed to. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, we got a range over here. They're non-lethal. You guys can shoot these. And so you and I are like shooting them. We're shooting these like plywood targets, and you were really good at it. And the look on your face, I was like, I don't know if Joe's ever going to come back.
Well, and that's where they told us, hey, man, no one's scared of these because they look like an assault rifle. They are scared of handguns. And that's where that whole story unfolded. I'm like, maybe I leave this up to you guys, like the pros.
I also remember using the satellite phone so that the troops could call their families.
Yeah.
Because it was hard for those guys in there to be able to call home. And those satellite phone minutes were like $2 or $3 a minute.
I was going to say they were $3 a minute, and we had been under strict like provision to not use them if we didn't have to. And you and I said, fuck it. If it costs us $500, $600, $1,000, like we'll pay for it out of our own pocket. Like, how many people can actually call home right now?
And then we would call the radio station on the sat phone, and we would give them the phone number of a relative. And then the radio station would call the relative and then get the relative on the phone. And then we would hand the sat phone over. And there were these amazing phone calls with their permission, obviously, that they said, yeah, we could do this on the air. And to hear a soldier communicate with their family, and to hear the questions a mother would ask, and to hear the things that the soldier would say to the family. And this is all on the air. And so the reaction from the audience is all of a sudden getting put in this incredibly personal place where if you're a civilian with no experience about what it's like to have someone just like deployed in your family, this was a really personal way for you to understand what that feeling was like.
Yeah. And we do have to harken back to the idea of like, even in 2006, it was not easy communication.
No.
Like we said it, but you didn't have FaceTime. You didn't have internet access. There was no Zoom. There was none of this.
They were calling cards, and you walked into a room with a phone bank and waited in line to make a 10-minute phone call. Then you had to decide who you were going to call. So heaven forbid you're married and your parents are divorced. That's 3 phone calls you need to make, and you can only get to make 1.
Yeah, and you do it to the person that's spreading communication to the rest of the family.
Right.
And so, like, it was a special moment for a lot of different reasons.
It's also the first time that we sat down to interview a soldier that was questioning while we were there. And I remember some of the guys, and I was so afraid for them to get in trouble for saying this stuff. And I'd be like, oh my God, don't say that. Because like, I was afraid I was then going to get them in trouble by giving them a platform to like, be like, I don't know what the fuck we're doing here. And like, so we were hearing all different sides of the experience of the war at that time from the guys themselves. And also to hear, like, remember we reunited 2 brothers?
Mm-hmm.
The Semenoff brothers, I think their last name was. And they were both deployed in 2 different parts of the country, and they bumped into each other in Baghdad.
Mm-hmm.
And like, imagine your sibling and you both are serving in a war, never mind how your parents are feeling, right? But you know where your brother is and you know what the shit's going down there and he knows where you are. And then you get this 10 minutes to see him and hug. And like, we were standing there in the middle of this thing and it was like, oh my God, like how amazing is that?
Well, you sort of know where they are, right?
Right.
Like you kind of have an idea.
You know the region. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the fact that you both show up at the same place at the same time and are able to see each other, it's incredible. It's really, all those moments are what added to what I say made this life changing. Like something you'll never, ever experience again. And when we talked in the beginning about like, what did your mom or how did your parents feel about this shit? All I could say to them is like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to do something. And you're never, ever, ever going to, as a civilian in our lifetime, be able to go to these places, let alone Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the birthplace of Abraham. That there's no fucking way you're going to be able to do that. So if we give up on this opportunity to do this and to like spread like a little bit of semblance of home to these people who have given their lives, like it's a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. So as we go to leave Camp Cropper, we were given some gifts. And we were told at that time that we were not allowed to talk about them. They were at that time classified. This was 15 years ago. And basically, the prisoners were outfitted with a color-coded like pajama system, clothing that was brightly colored so that they could tell the level of threat based on the jumpsuit that the person was wearing. Different colors meant different things, and the prisoners didn't know what the coloring code was. We weren't supposed to know what it was. So before we left, some of these jumpsuits were given to us, and we were sworn to secrecy that we were not to talk about them.
Yeah, but you and I were like, yo, we got great pajamas.
Yeah. Well, we weren't supposed to talk about them on the air, which we didn't. We didn't give away any kind of classified information. But when we get back to the guys that we were with for the first few days, they were like, how was it? And we were like, it was unbelievable. They were like, we've heard about that place, but nobody gets to go inside, whatever. And we were like, they gave us this stuff. We'll show you later, because we came out of the prison and then it was time to go to the concert. So we go to the USO concert, and it is one of the most memorable concerts I've ever been to in my life.
Greatest picture I've ever taken in my life.
It was thousands of U.S. troops on this, in front of this plywood stage with barely any lighting. And they had to have this stuff in the middle of the night because it was so hot during the day. It wasn't possible to have a concert in the middle of the day. And so the guys from Drowning Pool were playing a concert for somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 U.S. troops, all of them armed and in uniform. And we get there, and we had told the guys we were embedded with, hey, we saw the guys from Drowning Pool in Kuwait. They told us to come to the show, and they were like, do you think that we could meet the band or whatever? And we were like, yeah, absolutely. And so when we got there, we found the USO people, and we were like, hey, we're the people from Boston from the radio station. The Drowning Pool guys told us to come and find them when we got here. And they were like, hey, do you want to go up and introduce the band? And I was like, I flew all the way to Baghdad, and you guys are going to make me introduce you on stage? And they're like, fuck yeah. And how do you say no, right? And so I go up on this stage, and I cracked some joke about asking where the people from New York were, because these are troops from all over the United States. And all of the people were chanting that they were from New York or whatever, knowing you were from New York. And then I was like, where are the people from Massachusetts? Tell them that the Yankees suck. And then people were booing and yelling and like throwing stuff. And then I had to introduce Drowning Pool, and the picture you're talking about, you were behind the drum set at the back of the stage, and you took a picture of my back with me with the microphone, with the thousands of troops screaming in the crowd. And it's like this insane photo of, it's like the most random rock concert I've ever been to in my life. It was so crazy.
I'm looking at that picture now, and I don't think I realized the picture that I was taking when I took it. I was just so focused on making sure it happened. But like, you can see their set list in this picture on both sides of their monitor. Yeah, and you can see the center house, which the front of house center call, which is nothing, right? And it's just a sea.
There's no barricade. There's no. It's just soldiers with rifles, as far as you can see.
And they're all throwing up their horns.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it couldn't have been a more memorable. And those microphones, by the way, like, those are the classic mics, like the one to the right of you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just everything worked out. It's so awesome.
And everybody has water on them all the time, a water bottle. When you're in a place like that, we talked about the hydration. You've just always got at least 1 or 2 bottles of water on you. And at some point when Drowning Pool came out and started playing, people started squirting their water bottles, and it looked like fireworks in the sky because it was underneath these like floodlights. There was no concert lighting. There was no nothing. It was the band playing on a plywood stage with some like emergency lighting that you would light up like a parking lot with.
There's literally 2 floodlights for, like, you would say a parking lot on here, lighting a stage for a concert for, I bet you there were 5,000 people there. Yeah. Easy.
There is some footage of the show. If you get into the underbelly of YouTube and you look up Drowning Pool, Baghdad, USO 2006, like, you can find some video of this show. And the reason why they went on this USO tour is that Rolling Stone had polled U.S. service members about their favorite song. And Bodies had come back as the favorite song of U.S. troops. And the guys from Drowning Pool were like, we want to go on a tour and play it for them. And when they played Bodies at the end of the set, people started shooting their rifles and crowd surfing, and there were guns everywhere. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. I'm literally lost for words because it was such an incredible experience.
Now, you got to give it up to the guys from Drowning Pool because they insisted that they stay and sign autographs and take pictures with every single service member. And when I tell you those guys sat there for at least 7 hours, it was almost daylight by the time the Drowning Pool guys were done because they wanted to make sure that they took photos with every single service member and signed autographs. And it was amazing.
Well, we have one of the very first pictures. We're rolling like luxury, right? I guess 23:30. So it was just about midnight, and we're the first pictures at a show that size.
Yeah,
and they, like you said, they literally met, and they didn't just sign shit and say hi.
Where are you from? People. What do you do? What unit are you with?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
They what incredible guys. What incredible dudes.
So later on that night, we go back to our trailer with the guys that we were embedded with. And we decide to let the cat out of the bag a little bit with just a few guys to show them what we had been given when we left the prison.
It was like we had gold.
And they were like, oh my God, will you guys please put these jumpsuits on, and we're going to give you guns, and we want you to hold them, and we want to take pictures of you guys dressed up like arrested terrorists.
See, I don't know how it was for growing up as a young woman, but like for if you're a 14, 15-year-old kid and you stumbled across like your older brother's porn and you had it and all your friends like, oh shit, man, you got this? Let's fuck around with this. Like, that's kind of what it felt like. Like, we had these things we were not supposed to have. And everyone's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's hang out. Like,
we didn't put the pictures up online. We didn't talk about it in any public way. This was a little bonding moment we had with just a few select people. And they were like, we're going to dress up the DJ and the producer in these insurgent jumpsuits, and we're going to give you guys guns to hold, and we're going to take pictures, and this is just going to be for us. These are just private little photos that we have.
Well, as long as you remember what you're wearing, right?
So we didn't go to bed until like right before sunup because we were up so late at the concert and screwing around taking these pictures. And because I had to be escorted to go to the bathroom, I had started setting an alarm to wake up earlier than you guys so that I could sneak off and go to the bathroom by myself and sneak back because I just wanted to go to the bathroom by myself. And so that morning the alarm went off and I got up and I snuck off to go to the bathroom, and the major from the unit was on his way to wake us up to go to breakfast. It was really early. The sun had just come up. We had gone to bed maybe 2 or 3 hours before. And I had just gotten back to the trailer and was going inside the trailer, and the major was walking up and he started screaming at me because I had fallen asleep in the prisoner jumpsuit and had left the trailer dressed like that and walked across the base at dawn to go to the bathroom and did not even realize the position that I had put myself in. And the major was screaming, "What the fuck are you doing? The MPs are trained to shoot to kill anyone they see wearing those. Do you know how much fucking paperwork it is if you get shot on my base?"
Well, it goes back to the beginning, right? Like it was color coded.
Right.
So some people were stunned. Some people were contained. You, of course, are wearing like shoot on sight.
Right.
And so that goes back to the very beginning. Like it was a lot bigger fuck up if something happened to you than it happened to me. I had to like, hey, this guy's okay. Probably.
Yeah, don't worry. The insurance company doesn't care about the producer
No,
as long as
you-
Carrie
you-
doesn't get hurt.
You were at the extreme the entire time, whether it be like the insurance or straight up, like you were wearing the color coding system that said, fuck, man, grab this person. They should not be around. Probably shoot them. Like that's what it was, right? I can't think of it in any other way, but
I apologize to anyone that served our country that's listening to this, shaking your head at our idiocy. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
Thank God. There were a few times that I can't believe we made it out of there alive. That was one of those times.
Well, we made a lot of dumb moves, but a lot of incredible ones.
Yeah.
And we learned, right? We went to Afghanistan after that. Not so bad, right?
Not so well. I wasn't dumb enough to wear like insurgent jumpsuits while I was walking to the bathroom. So yeah, I did learn some valuable lessons. So the next day we had to get ready to leave Baghdad and to leave the guys that we had spent like the last 4 something days with or whatever. And so before we left, they wanted to take us on a tour of all of the palaces that Saddam Hussein had kind of built. And you talk fuck you money, right? So we talked about the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and Saddam Hussein had rerouted one of the rivers so that he could make his own like lake that he could swim in, so he could have a paddle boat. And then around this man-made lake, he built all these palaces. There was Ba'ath Party headquarters, which was the political party he was a part of. There was a palace called the Perfume Palace, which was a palace for all of the
mistresses,
the mistresses and the whores that Uday and Qusay and Saddam would bring in from other countries, and kept them all in a palace. He had a palace just for his mother-in-law.
He had the Flintstones, right? The bedrock.
So he, even though he hated America, just like Osama bin Laden, he loved American culture references. And so Saddam Hussein built a life-size Flintstones village, like with Fred Flintstone's house, how the way that Fred and Barney's houses looked on the Flintstones cartoon, he built a full-size version of the Flintstones village for his grandkids.
Yeah.
And that was all part of this massive complex. And then Saddam Hussein had started constructing a palace that he called the Victory Over the Americas Palace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a palace that was bigger than the rest, that was to prove and brag about how the Iraqis had beaten the Americans. And the first bomb dropped in the war was on Ba'ath Party headquarters. And the second bomb dropped in the war was this 2,000-pound bomb they called a Moab, right? The mother of all bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And they dropped it right through the roof of the Victory over the Americas Palace, which still had cranes around it because it was still being built when we declared war on Iraq.
That thing was like longer than a football field in the main banquet hall, right?
It was
that
massive. I've never seen so much marble. Like we were joking that like quarries were emptied because it was the most beautiful marble.
Have a piece of marble from that, by the way.
Yeah,
like I've got a piece and it sits up on the mantle. And every time someone asks like, oh, what's that from? Because it looks like it gets into the whole. This is where the first bomb that was dropped to start the war actually happened. Like, this is from the floor. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, no. Here's the very beautiful book, and here are the stories of what actually went down.
Well, it's got to be something. I mean, I remember meeting somebody that knew you, and they were like, oh, you worked for that company in Boston? Oh, I had a friend that worked there. Who? Oh, Joe. And I was like, and I would laugh, and they would be like, what? Because you've been incredibly successful in your professional life, and it's got to be crazy when people that know you professionally find out that you were on this insane journey, because this is not a normal experience.
A lot of people think that I was actually in the military. So, like, I get a lot of the time people saying, oh, when you were overseas, when you were serving, and I immediately stopped that, right? Like, that's not appropriate to ever say you served when you didn't.
Right.
But I do share the story of like, no, I went as an embedded reporter on this incredible journey on the anniversary of 9/11. And I tell the story and people are like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, you used to be able to do that stuff, right? Like that was the shit you could dream and do. And they're like, they can't kind of fathom it. And it's always, to me, I've done a lot of shit. That's the highlight of my career. Without a doubt, being able to say that I was actually blessed enough to be a part of this.
It was, I remember walking around this complex going like, oh my God, like this is the kind of stuff that you see like on the news, these massive palaces, this exorbitant wealth. And, you know, they took us into the Ba'ath Party headquarters. And like I said, you needed like these paddle boats to kind of get in. Like he would go across these lakes and stuff. And they showed us the conference room where all of these Iraqi leaders, they had intel that they were all meeting, and that's why they dropped the bomb there so they could kill them all at the same time. And then they started taking us into like the palace where Saddam Hussein lived. And one of the stories that you were alluding to earlier, at least I think, is the swimming pool story, right?
Yes, it was. And I was just going to jump on it and say it, but I don't want to say it.
No, go ahead. I want to hear the story from your perspective.
Well, it was one of those two pictures that we talked about, right? There's two infamous pictures. There's the picture of him at the parade grounds, and then there's the picture of him, what was Dan Rathers, sitting in the Ba'ath headquarters doing an actual interview. And I think that's probably the most infamous because he's literally sitting at a table in the bathhouse headquarters where they would have meetings, have a dinner, and during the dinner, they would drain the pool. And then they would go and execute people. And we have a picture from after one of those incidents where there's still a blood stain from where someone put a pistol to someone's head in that pool, and they just didn't happen to fill it back up or clean it out.
Yeah, so the war started.
Like, yeah, and that's one of those moments again where like it's literally we talk about Mesopotamia, we talk about the Ziggurat of Ur, like all that stuff, you know, and we'll get to that obviously, but like there's so much that we saw firsthand that's literally a portion of this world's history.
Right.
Not a moment of like, hey, these people settled here in Boston in 1646 or whatever. Like
this is political history. This is world. Like these are meetings that were happening in the middle of wars. Things will be studied for centuries. And this pool, one of the things that Uday and Qusay and Saddam used to like to do is execute people in this pool. And then it was described to us that they would like pour acid on the bodies, because obviously if you're executing people, like you don't want to have to pull the corpse out. So they would pour acid on the bodies, and then the bodies would just get dissolved with the acid and go down the drain. And then they would fill the pool back up again. And then the Husseins like to swim in it.
Mm-hmm.
Having just executed people in it.
And Uday and Qusay, to that point, would fly in these super expensive prostitutes from all over the world. And if I'm remembering correctly, they were fond of Germans. Not the point, but they would bring them in, and when they were done with them and passing them around, they would feed them through a wood chipper to feed the fish in the lake they created by cutting off the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to really stop the water flow from going to the Shiites in the southern part of the province. Like, it wasn't just that they wanted this, like everything was tactical and everything was super maniacal.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm a little off on my facts, but you know.
But that's basically like they didn't leave bodies behind, and they got off on this extreme power and wielding this fear. And so we have pictures, the palace that they called the Perfume Palace, where they used to keep the girlfriends and the prostitutes. They actually had hearts carved into the balcony railing so that you knew that that's what that palace was for. And it was right next to the mother-in-law's palace, which is also sadistic. But that they used to execute these women, that they would bring over, wine and dine them on private jets and do all this stuff. And these women had no idea that they were going to get fed into a wood chipper and become fish food in this private lake, that then Saddam Hussein, who actually liked to swim in the lake, and he had put like docks out in the lake where he could swim to and sunbathe. It was insane.
And these incredible party boats, like giant houseboat party boats that would go from location to location, because while it was a lake, it was a compound that had all these islands, and each island, like you mentioned, was the Flintstone or the Bath headquarters or the mother-in-law. Like, you had to go to it by different boat. Yeah. And so they would just take you place to place, and you would go from the guest quarters to the headquarters, and that's where during dinner they would slowly drain the pool.
Yeah.
So and that's the underbelly of what was actually happening. That's the stuff that you don't hear about. Like, I'm sure you could find the detail of it while you're reading and researching, but goddamn.
Like, when we're hearing these stories from people that were actually there, and when they took us into that room at the Bath Party headquarters, because we're walking through rubble, the Americans made sure that all of these places were destroyed, roofs caved in, giant bombs dropped. When we took that picture at that table, the location of that famous Dan Rather interview, again, just like, you know, the parade grounds, it's like we recognize that from watching the news growing up, and you're like, we're here now. This is real. Like, you can go and look at that Dan Rather photo and then look at the picture we took, and it's all rubble and the walls are cracked, and we're with a bunch of American soldiers that are cracking jokes and stuff. But that's a real place. Like, Dan Rather had an interview with Saddam Hussein talking about peace treaties and UN inspectors and all of this kind of stuff. And then you and I are sitting there in the rubble of it, not that much longer, you know, after. It's just strange.
And Major is sitting in one of the chairs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, our detail that was with us is literally sitting in one of the chairs of where that interview happened. Yeah. So, like, I think about it in the sense of, like, okay, so Dan Rathers did it and we did it.
Yeah.
I know that sounds weird,
but
like,
it is weird. It is weird. And we had these moments on the trip, and there's another one coming up where it's just like, how did we get here? Right? So we go on this tour, and this is our last day in Baghdad, and we had to say goodbye to all but one of the guys in Baghdad. And Nick, who was kind of the guy that was like sworn to kind of stick with me and by default, as long as nothing happened to me, but you by default. And we had to get on a Blackhawk, and they flew us at night from Baghdad on these 2 Blackhawks from Baghdad to a place called Balad, which you hear a lot of stories about in Iraq, because Balad got mortared a lot. And it was Camp Anaconda, and they called it Mortaritaville because they got mortared every day. And come to find out, we were once again flying with a general and his security detail on these Blackhawks at night. And because we were flying at night, we were able to get out and not do it the combat way. But because we flew into Baghdad in the middle of the day, we had to go in a plane and do the combat landing. But we flew out in the middle of the night out of Baghdad, just you and I and Nick. We land in Balad, and Balad was, Anaconda was a base that was split in half. There was the Air Force side of the base, and there was the Army side of the base. So when we landed with the Army, the general and his security detail took off and just left me, you, and Nick there to navigate our way with all of our shit to the other side of the base to show our documents to get on an Air Force plane, because we had to fly from Balad down to southern Iraq to this place called Talil, where we were going to be embedded with a medevac unit. And you can't spend any time in Balad without getting mortared. One of the bags had gotten left on the Blackhawk.
Almost all of our bags we left. Like, one was left on the Blackhawk, and I think we left a couple other, like, at the drop for it, because we were racing all over the base at 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
And you're not allowed to use lights. So we had these headlamps that only had red lights, and the helicopter crew just was throwing stuff into the ground, and we were trying to collect all of our stuff. So at one point, you and Nick made your way back to the helicopters to retrieve the rest of the bags. And Nick had kind of set me up in a place, and he was like, "This is where I want you to stay." And I go, "Don't move." And I got left with the satellite phone. And so because we were 8 hours ahead, I called the radio station, and it was like, afternoon drive. I think Mike Shue was on the air, or Mike Shue was doing nights or whatever, but I was talking to Shue. And I'm on the phone with him. I'm exhausted. There were really bad sand fleas, so we're getting eaten alive by the bugs there. They were terrible. And you and Nick are grabbing these bags and on your way back to me, and the sirens start going off, and we start getting mortared. And it was like, what the fuck? And so the three of us, so first of all, I hang up the satellite phone unexpectedly. So now everybody in Boston that was just listening to me live on the air is panicked that I'm dead now, because they could hear the sirens and the explosions on the air. And you and Nick and I started taking what would be known as selfies, but taking photos with a handheld camera inside this concrete tube that we sought refuge in during a mortar attack. And we're making faces like, well, if we're going to die in a mortar attack, we might as well take some photos. And we were joking that people would find these photos after we died.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is there were all these tells, right? Like, so when we took our Blackhawks, we waited. Remember that?
Yeah.
We waited and waited and waited to get on those Blackhawks because it was for a general, and they were not going to let them leave until the general decided he was going and when he was there to go. And the way they flew them like 20, 30 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
At least that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
At full tilt.
They were tactically flying them because of the VIP, i.e. the general.
Right.
They had intel that this was the safest time to move the general. We're moving the general now. Get on the helicopter. You guys are going to, because there's 2 empty seats or 3 empty seats.
And I remember vividly that, like, again, off the side of the helicopter is a 50 cal and a gunner.
Yeah.
And there would be little flickers in the field that we were driving over or flying over. And those guns would turn like a radar right to whatever that flicker was.
Yeah.
And then they would follow it as we went past it. And I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. We know there's a general in the copter ahead of us. So I guess that makes sense. We've been here long enough. And it started getting a little bit more of that as we got closer to where we were going.
Yeah.
And so when we landed, I remember we dropped you off and we get on the bus, and those were the contractors driving the bus. And the guy says to us, like, don't worry about that shit in the background. It's fine. It happens here all the time. And what he was referring to was like mortars starting to pop off. And so it didn't really make sense until now that I can look back at it. But we were actively getting closer to a place that's being mortared like fucking crazy. And the fact that we went and grabbed what we needed to do and got back to you, and we were still all in a safe place, and we just resided to the fact of like, let's make sure we document it because we don't know what the fuck's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like that was the peak of where we're at. And
that
somehow,
was our mentality, that in the last 5 or 6 days, we had acclimated to the point where we were like, we're getting mortared. Let's just take some photos of us in this concrete tube in case nothing happens. At least people will know, like, this is what we were doing.
Yeah, let's document the shit out of it. And it's so crazy to me that how quickly we shifted into that and how quickly we moved from zone to zone, but how ramped up it got as we got closer to the border.
Yeah.
Like the closer we got to a half military, half civilian, like the crazier it got with the attack strategy from from the people that we're fighting. So like, and then I'm sure next thing we need to talk about, obviously, is how like the pinnacle of that is when we get on the actual plane, right?
Right. So we go to Balad to get to this base that's half Air Force, half Army, because we have to fly a long distance, and we're going to do it in the dead of night on an aircraft, on a plane they call a Sherpa, which basically looks like a shoebox with wings on it. It doesn't look like it should fly at all, and it's a troop transport. I think it holds like 45 people. So at this point, we get manifested for this flight. And what we found out after was that all the troops that were on this flight were guys that were stationed at Anaconda who had been just dealing with the shit. And they were going for like 4 days of like R&R in like Qatar or something. And they just wanted to get the hell out of there and not get shot at for a few days. And there were a couple empty seats on the plane. This is where we said goodbye to Nick. Because at this point, we're not under his protection anymore, and we're going to be taken custody by the medevac unit when we arrive in Talil. So we're on this, we get on the plane. The crew of the aircraft, the crew of the Sherpa is told there's 2 VIPs getting on the plane. Now, it's the middle of the night. It's a dark base. We get on with all of our shit. We've got body armor on. We're wearing gloves, hair pulled back, helmets. We've got Wiley X glasses on because it's dusty as hell and there's prop wash and all that. And we get on and the crew chief says, sit right here. He knows I'm female, doesn't know who I am, doesn't know who you are, just knows we're VIPs and that he needs to get us from point A to point B and we don't have security with us anymore. So they seatbelt us to the wall of the aircraft. And it's like 130 degrees inside this aircraft. There's no air conditioning. And we're with these battle-hardened, dirty guys that just want to get the fuck out of here for a few days that are all sitting on the plane. And I look over, and there's a cooler, like a construction worker would take his lunch in, an igloo cooler that holds a 12-pack of beer, and that's it. And I ask the crew chief, hey, whose cooler is that? And just like you were talking about with the hydration, he's like, are you thirsty, ma'am? Do you need some water? And I was like, no, I'm good. I just want to know whose cooler that is. Ma'am, is there something wrong? Is there something I can get you? And I was like, no, I just want to know whose cooler that is. And he was like, with all due respect, ma'am, why? And I said, because it has my name on it. The cooler on this random plane at 3:00 in the morning had a property of Mistress Carrie bumper sticker on it. Come to find out, this plane was a Rhode Island National Guard flight that I had sent care packages to, including my bobblehead,
I was going to say the bobblehead.
They put the bobblehead in the cockpit and used to send me photos of flying in Iraq with my bobblehead in the cockpit, and we randomly got on their plane.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, the visor of the crew chief comes up, and he's screaming, and he unhooks, like the harnesses are like a race car, like a 5-point harness, right? And, 2 minutes ago, we were just these two random VIPs that they were just supposed to protect. They didn't know who we were. Now he's undoing the harness. The pilot comes out of the cockpit. He's hugging me. Like it was the most random thing in the world.
At 4:30 in the morning, nonetheless,
yeah,
right?
It's still dark out. And that was why they were flying this plane, because, again, this is a big, fat, slow plane flying over unsecured places in Iraq. And that's when these flights have to go, is when it's dark. And so it was so random. And all the guys that had gotten on the plane with us that were going to R&R are like, who are these people?
This is fucking Mistress Carrie. This is Mistress Carrie. I remember him saying that to
people. And they were like, we don't know who that is. We're like from Oklahoma or something. And so then it comes time to take off. They secure us to the wall again. And remember, you and I, we had all our shit on, and it was so hot, and we're seatbelted in.
Nodding.
It just, like the dolphin diving, like falling asleep, and you're trying to stay awake. And then all of a sudden, we get woken up.
Mm-hmm.
They were green flares, right? The phosphorescent, like the fireworks.
I don't remember the color, but I remember the flares being fired off the side because they were shooting at us.
Yeah.
And we were obviously able to take off and whatnot, but it was like a scene in a movie, right? Like we were nodding in and out of consciousness, and all of a sudden you come to and you look up, and plain as day, they're firing the flares like shot after shot after shot off the side of the plane, and you just see like they're fucking firing at us. Like this is surface to air or ground to whatever. They
were firing countermeasures because they were firing like heat-seeking shit from the ground, and so they were firing countermeasures off the side of this plane. And you and I are just sitting there strapped to the wall in the middle of the night. There's no lights on, but every time one of these flares burst, it would light up the inside of the plane. Mm-hmm. And you and I are just looking at each other.
And everyone on the plane had the same face. They were just like, all right, man.
Yeah.
This happens every day.
Every day. And you and I are like, oh, okay.
All right.
And so they made a special stop in Talil to drop us off in southern Iraq. And then they were going to continue on outside of the country to bring these guys out to R&R. And we get dropped off in a place called Talil at dawn. Like barely the sun is up. And we are now embedded with the witch doctors.
Yeah.
Who are a medevac unit. And as we're getting off the plane and taking all of our shit, which is noticeably less shit than we showed up with because we've been giving T-shirts and stuff out as we've been gone. So we're taking less and less baggage with us as we go. And as we're getting off the plane, the Rhode Island guys are like hugging us and now we're getting dropped off, and the guys in Talil are looking at us, and they're like, why are you guys hugging all of these guys? And then it comes out because the medevac guys are from Mass, and they find out the Air Force guys are from Rhode Island, and then they start talking. Meanwhile, the guys in the plane are like, can we just fucking get on leave already? Can everybody stop hugging?
And then we got dropped 102 and the 407, right? Like that's where we were dropped off with those guys.
Yeah, so when we get to Talil, again, Talil is a base that's half Air Force and half Army. And the Army side was the side that we were embedded with, and those were the actual medevac guys, the Black Hawk medics. But they wanted to take us around the base and kind of show us everything that was going on. So the civil engineers, the 102nd that you were talking about, those guys were also from Massachusetts, but they were the guys that were there with like the heavy equipment. They were there like fortifying the bases. They were there building facilities and all of this stuff.
And you got to drive like a big, you got to drive a bunch of the big heavy equipment.
Yeah, they were like, put Carrie in the giant bulldozer. Throw her in there and see see what she does. And so you and I got this amazing tour. And one of the things that we were told. It was like, we're going to take you guys to see something on this base that you're never going to see ever again. And you're not going to believe it. And no one will ever believe it when we tell you that you saw it. What had happened was when they had moved into that base, the Air Force is the brunt of a lot of jokes and the punchline to a lot of jokes because they have standards of living that other branches of the military are not accustomed to. They get treated nicer. And so when the Air Force arrived on that base, they were like, this housing is substandard. We're not living in these barracks. And so they were like, no problem. We'll move the Army in here. And they were like, okay, good. But what the Air Force didn't realize is that the other housing hasn't been built yet. And so they had just given up sleeping in trailers.
For all the tents.
For
right?
tents. Yeah. And so the Army guys were like, we're going to drive you through, take pictures of the tents, because this is the only time you're ever going to see the Air Force living in tents and the Army's living in trailers. And it was a very sore spot with the Air Force guys because the barracks weren't going to be built till after they got home.
And I remember that base because there was I guess an air raid or the equivalent of that. And they all like moved into the shelter in place or whatever it is. But we had been like hardened, like we had been across the wire. We'd been like at Anaconda. We'd been through all that shit. So like everyone's running and we're like slowly smoking
like
and imagining.
We had gotten used to
kids, whatever.
Sirens and explosions. Yeah. And when we were in Tallil, somebody had sent a rocket over the perimeter wall and it just happened to be a dud and it skipped down the flight line.
Yeah.
And we were like in this bomb shelter outside the chow hall. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what happens. Like, and one of the other things that we ended up doing, which was against the initial meeting when we got picked up in Kuwait, was that because we were with these units, they didn't want us to look like civilians and media.
Oh, yeah.
So they had given us like camouflage blouse tops and stuff because they wanted us to blend in more with the military. And the same thing happened to me in Afghanistan too. And then when you go to get into a chow hall or something and you show remember all the times we went in to use the IDs, and because we had media IDs and they hadn't seen media where we were, they were like, who are you guys and where did you get these credentials? We don't even know who you are. And so it was always this weird thing because we had been moved around so much that it was like we always had to explain to people like who we were and what we were doing. And no, we're allowed to come in. We're allowed to get on this plane. No, we're allowed to eat lunch. And so sitting there in like these concrete tubes during a rocket attack, it was like, what?
Yeah. What was incredible about the chow hall was the fact that like it was so hot there all the time that you could have 5,000 calories for a meal. Like that's what I think I love the most.
Oh my God, we ate everything.
Yeah, they encouraged, and I have to ask, how much weight did you lose? I lost like 20 pounds.
Yeah, it was something like that. It had to have been at least 15 pounds. And you can see it in the photos because if you look at them in chronological order, we get more and more gaunt and more sunburned, and you get hairier and hairier as the photos go on.
Well, I'm going to say, like, I'm looking through the book, and like this point in our adventure, you and I look fucking really good. We're nice and tan and thin.
Skinny, and we look tough, and we're like battle hardened. Like we almost look cool. We weren't, but we almost did.
Oh my God.
So one of the things we got to do with the medics was we got to learn about the medical treatment. And we learned that the medics were also responsible for providing medical care, not only just for U.S. troops, but also for people in the surrounding areas. And remember, we did that litter transfer?
Mm-hmm. The tail to tail?
Yeah. So they were transporting an injured insurgent that had been injured attacking the Americans. And they had scooped him up, bandaged him up, put him on a Black Hawk, brought him to this base, and then he was getting taken off that Black Hawk on what they call a litter. It's like the stretcher, carried across the tarmac and put on a different Black Hawk to be taken to a different hospital facility where locals would get taken, whereas the American service members would get taken to the hospital on base and then transferred to Germany or wherever they were going to end up going for treatment. And so they were like, do you guys want to help?
Yeah.
And so we have a picture. Did you take that picture of me carrying
No, I didn't take that picture. We took that picture that was given to us.
Oh, okay. So somebody took it for us.
Yeah, I was on there were two of them that were being transferred, and I was on the one in the back.
Oh, okay.
And you were on the front, and someone that we were with took that picture.
But it was such a crazy thing to be there with 3 American service members carrying an injured insurgent from one American aircraft to the other. And I was holding one of the handles up by his head. And I just remember this really weird moment of like looking at this person who just an hour ago was trying to kill Americans. And here I am with Americans saving his life.
Well, that's kind of the brilliance of our country, right? Like, I'm with you. Like, it's not that it was hard to do it, but I'm also thinking, like, why the fuck are we doing this?
Yeah.
And then you realize that, like,
because we're better.
Even though this person was trying to do harm to us, we still believe in freedom and liberty and things of that nature.
And being humanitarian and it was just a very weird kind of conflicting experience where you feel this rage in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, it made me look at the medics in this totally different way because that's their job to just be selfless and to provide care because the person needs care, and that's the end of the discussion for them.
Yeah, it seems so black and white, and I don't know if I could be black and white like that, but like literally they were black and white in the sense of like, this person needs help, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. We got to know the medics and kind of learn what it is that they did and what they do, and it is kind of amazing the leaps and bounds in medical care that's possible in such a small area. Like, I remember being fascinated by, you know, the Black Hawk, like, outfitted as the portable hospital and like the technology they were able to cram in, like that if you were able to be picked up by these medics within what they call the golden hour, right? That's within the hour of injury, that the chances are that you're going to live.
Yeah.
And so we spent days with the medics, but there was one day in particular that one of the officers from the Air Force side of the base coordinated for us. And they said, just kind of like the day we visited the prison, where it was kind of like this one-off, we pulled strings for you kind of day. And and the Army guys, the medevacs, were like, all right, well, we'll see you guys later, whatever. And they were like, just bring your body armor with you and like your cameras and stuff. But that's all you need to bring with you. And we're like, okay, whatever. What do you remember about that introduction with them?
I remember that we did not know anyone's name.
Yeah.
I remember it felt like Ghost Recon. There was a guy, very unassuming, looked like a million other guys. He would not give us his name. We didn't even ask.
Oh, actually, we asked. We did ask.
Yeah. And you said, you're not going to tell us your name, are you? And we got in a vehicle, and he was in a T-shirt and pants.
There was 2 of them. There were 2 guys.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they took us out on the corner of the base, and they took us to the Ziggurat of Ur, which is a spot called the birthplace of Abraham, Mesopotamia. If you're a Bible reader, the cradle of civilization.
It's a place that like people study in archaeology school, like and architecture school and design school. Like, this thing's as old as the pyramids.
Yeah, and with all of the major religions, like they all agree on one thing, right? And that's Abraham. And so we see the only thing they agree upon, and that's the house of Abraham, and it's still in standing. And we see the first well ever put in the ground, and we see the first language ever written. And we go to this place, and there's a family. There's a man there that we're introduced to. He's a civilian, and his family has been watching over these grounds for hundreds of years. Like generations and generations and generations of his family have just been overseeing these grounds. And they kind of give us a tour. Well, and you will obviously bring this like full speed, but like these two ghosts of humans who the wind blows up on their shirt and they're fully strapped, are just walking around quietly, looking, surveilling, standing on top of roofs all of a sudden. You're like, how the fuck did you get up there? Whatever. And then we get back in a vehicle, and I'm really paraphrasing it, but like it seemed like such a mystery to me of what was actually happening.
They picked us up in civilian clothes, and they were wearing like cargo shorts and T-shirts, and we don't get told where we're going. We have no idea who these guys are, and we're making small talk. Now, the first thing is when we drove out to the corner of the base, in order to get off the base and to go where we were going, because first of all, we had taken over the country of Iraq. Yeah. We didn't have any kind of interaction with Iraqi people. And so we're now driving off this base, and the guy shows this card out the window. Not an ID with a picture or anything. It just had this long serial number on it. And he shows it to the guy at the checkpoint, and we're allowed to leave. We are now in like a Toyota 4Runner. We're not in a Humvee. We're not in an aircraft with a gunship. Nothing like we're used to. We're in an unassuming white Toyota 4Runner or Highlander, like whatever. And we're just driving down this dusty road, and it's just the four of us.
And you lean forward and like, you're not going to tell us your name, are you? Or something like that, right? But
who are you guys? Like, I'm Carrie. This is Joe. Like, what,
didn't we name him?
Didn't we
name one of the guys?
We named both of them. So they're American. They got long hair, beards, like they're tan or dark skinned. That's important later. And they're talking, but like their heads are on a swivel. And you and I don't know where we're going. And so we're kind of nervous. We're exhausted. We haven't slept in like 2 weeks. And we're just like and we're like, you're not going to tell us your names, are you? And they said, no. So you and I start joking that these guys would make a good morning show duo on the radio. And so you and I decided to name them Casper and the Chameleon.
Oh, that's right.
Because first of all, at this moment, we didn't know they were armed because they're just dressed like dads, like in a soccer game. We had no idea what's going on. They said, you can bring your body armor with you, but you don't have to wear it. And so we're like, okay, this goes against everything we've been used to for the last 2 weeks. We're leaving the base. Our shit's not on. We're with people we don't know. We don't even know their names. They're not marked as military. They're not in uniform. We have no idea what's going on. And they drive us out into the middle of East Bumfuck. And I did some research. So the high ground overlooking Talil, the airbase, and that airbase used to be an Iraqi airbase that we then took over and maintained as an airbase when we took over the country. So according to the research, was an ancient city in southern Mesopotamia located near the original mouth of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. According to one estimate, was the largest city in the world from 2030 to 1980 BC, and its population was approximately 65,000 people, which is a massive idea considering of how early on in civilization this is. The site is marked by the ruins of the Great Ziggurat, which is a temple of Nana, the moon deity in Sumerian mythology. The Sumerian name for the city is Urim, and is considered by many to be the city of Kasdim, mentioned in the book of Genesis as the birthplace of the patriarch Abraham.
Yep.
The first excavation, so these ruins were built and lived in, and then eventually covered by time,
right,
by sandstorms, and just they were swept away in and disappeared.
And then welcome the Brits, right?
The first excavation of the site was made by the British consul, J.E. Taylor, who partially uncovered the ziggurat, which bore the inscription of Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, in 539 BC. Mm-hmm. Excavations took place from 1922 to 1934, and they were funded by the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania and led by the archaeologist Sir Charles Leonard Woolley, who discovered 1,850 burials during including 16 royal tombs, which were dated back to 2600 BC. So this place is incredibly historically important.
Yeah.
Is spiritually important, and is a place that is known for service members to go to visit because of its historical and spiritual significance. The man and the family that you referenced have lived on this land before they knew the ruins were there. And the grandfather of the guy that gave us the tour helped with the archaeologist that I just mentioned in uncovering the ruins. And this guy's family now lives there and kind of made money, you know, like just being the de facto kind of caretakers of this incredibly important piece of world history. Now, the guys, Casper and the Chameleon, as we affectionately call them, are special forces troops. To this day, we don't know who they are. We don't know what branch of the military. They could have been Delta. They could have been special. I mean, we know they're special forces, but we have no idea what branch. They could have been SEALs. Like we have no idea. They were incredibly gracious and sweet. They knew this guy that lived on the land with his family, and he was trustworthy. And this guy was kind of under the protection of the U.S. government and the military because of his proximity to the base, and also because the Americans were trying to preserve all of this world history and all of these sites. So they leave us with this guy for a guided personal tour of the ruins, which I recorded and still have the audio of. It's hard to understand him because he speaks an incredibly broken English. And Casper and the Chameleon took off and are going in and out of these tombs and up on the rooftops because they were looking for insurgents who were known to go there, not only because of the high ground over the base, but also knowing that Americans would go there and they could either kidnap them or kill them. And you and I are walking around. And one of the things this guy tells us is that Pope John Paul II had requested permission to Saddam Hussein to go on a pilgrimage to the ziggurat and to the birthplace of Abraham. And Saddam Hussein told the Pope,
go fuck yourself.
You can come, but I won't protect you.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Now, arguably the Pope, whatever Pope, is one of the most powerful and protected men on the planet at any given time. And he was denied a spiritual journey to this place that Mistress Carrie and Combat Joe are now wandering around with reckless abandon.
Well, and you remember the gentleman who oversaw the grounds, he was taking us down into tombs that were not necessarily open. Like they had excavated, but still time had still overtaken some of the stuff. And so he was taking us down into tombs, and it was getting to be nightfall at the time.
It was starting to get dark. And we had gone through, with everything that you and I ever did, we went through safety procedures. Mm-hmm. And Casper and the Chameleon had said, you don't got to wear your shit. That's what they referred our body armor to. You don't got to wear your shit. They set him up and put him outside the truck. And they said, if anything goes wrong,
grab him.
Get to the truck, put your shit on, and lay on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, what if we can't get to the truck? You remember what he said?
No.
We'll come and get you. And dead on balls.
I believe those guys.
I believed him too. I believed him too. And it was just like, again, you're this selflessness, this, wow, okay, so you're talking about possible insurgency, possible attack, possible whatever. And these guys are so matter-of-factly going, then we'll get you.
But isn't that what's so crazy about this whole fucking thing that we did? And I think, I mean, I went on and on about it at the beginning, but like, there was never the realization ever, at least to me, that we were ever in harm's way, even when shit was happening around us, even when these guys were like plainclothes, khaki shorts, you know, an Uzi on their back that you couldn't see, and, you know, a T-shirt, and they disappear because they're doing surveillance and like they're making sure that like nothing, like there never was a moment that we felt in all this, at least myself again, that there was ever anything wrong. And when we touched down home, like within a week or two, I started being like, what the fuck did we just do? What?
Yeah.
What? Wait. And I don't know if it was because we were high on not sleeping or
malaria
like the schedule
meds or like, I think we acclimated really quickly because we were forced to. And I think we just adjusted to what is normal for people in the military, that this is just normal stuff. This is matter of fact stuff. Like these safety briefs, this is what we do, and this is protocol. And so we didn't have time to think about it. It's not like, you know, we went through a safety brief and we were in the convoy. We get picked up by Casper and the Chameleon and we're in a truck, and then a half hour later we're walking around with this Iraqi dude that's telling us about Abraham and the Pope, and we're just like, okay. And then the next thing you know, we're back in the truck, and it was like we didn't have time to stop and process it until later. It would have been impossible, and I don't think we would have been able to function if we were constantly so self-aware. Like it I think about it now too, and it's just like, what the fuck were we doing there? Like, if you're listening to this interview, like, go and Google the ziggurat. Go and Google this stuff. Look at the world history Joe and I were able to see and experience, touching the bricks that were etched with Sumerian cuneiform writing. Like, it's a place that so few people ever get to go. You and I know we'll never be able to go there again. But for that moment, those few hours, and that place has a vibe, right? Remember you and I were talking about like, it was always windy there. And it had this, I don't want to say magnetic, but there was a feeling there. There was a vibe there. There was something in that place that, and I'm not a religious person, but something is going on in that place.
Well, and I imagine it like, so we know, right? Think about what we know. We know that Saddam cut off the water supply. Now imagine being in the Great Ziggurat and there was not a supply cut off of the water. Think about all the grasslands and fields and like the fertility of that land that was turned into desert because someone said, fuck this group of people.
I'm going to reroute this river.
Yeah. And like, that's kind of evil and wicked on the greatest faction of how you can be evil and wicked. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to create a party island. Like, every bit of it was cynical.
Yeah.
And so if you try to read and learn and whatnot from the past, and then to put it against what we actually saw firsthand, it hurts my head a little bit, right?
Yeah. No, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Jesus, literally Jesus, right? Like, I can't put enough of behind the idea that like, while we were there doing things in support of our troops and bringing some brevity and, you know, relief for even the briefest of moments to people who are willing to give their lives to protect us, we also were experiencing things that no one in this world has. The dignitaries can't go to the ziggurat ever these days. Like, who can ever say now on a short, like, if we're in a room and they're like, hey, we're going to give $1 million to someone who has the most life-changing experience. You're like, I've been to Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Like, no one else in the room can fucking pick up their hand and be there. Like, you saw writing on a brick of what's considered to be the first known language ever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right?
And while we're having this profound, amazing experience, I don't know if it was Casper or the Chameleon. One was very tall, had short hair and a beard. The other was shorter and had longer hair and a red T-shirt. We only have 2 very blurry photos of them because we weren't allowed to take photos of them for obvious reasons. And they're like those grainy Sasquatch videos, right? They looked at all of our photos before we went back and approved the photos that we had because by no circumstances could they have been caught in the background. But there were a couple ones that were really blurry and they were like, yeah, fuck it. You guys will have evidence that this day happened. So at one point, the tall guy, remember I said dark-skinned beard, that was going to come into play later, is communicating in Arabic, with the guy that's giving us the tour. And I think I leaned over to you or something and said, like, is this guy Iraqi too? Because he was speaking Arabic to the Iraqi tour guide. And Casper, and Casper and the Chameleon heard that. And all of a sudden, and I'm going to do this accent only because it makes the story funnier. He looks at me and goes, do you think I'm Iraqi? And I was like, well, you're dark-skinned with a beard and you're speaking Arabic and we are in fact in Iraq.
He's like, awesome.
And he's like, man, I get no respect. Yo, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm Puerto Rican. And you and I just are looking at each other like, what? And we're like, but you speak Arabic. And he's like, yeah, I speak all kind of languages.
Yeah.
And we were like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, I speak English, obviously. I speak Spanish. Obviously. I speak German. I speak Japanese. I speak Arabic. And you and I are like, who the fuck are these guys?
Yeah. Yeah. He was Brooklyn bred, and I think he was a Dominican dude, and he fucking straight up knew like 15 languages.
It was unbelievable. I thought he was Puerto Rican.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, he might have been Puerto Rican. I think he was
Puerto Rican. Yeah.
Apologies for confusing the two, but he literally knew like 12 to 15 languages, and it was so beautiful in the sense that he just could disappear.
Yeah.
Like, for what he was doing as a job and making a living, and he could literally just disappear.
He could go anywhere.
He could pass for almost anyone, and he was not I couldn't tell you what he looked like. You know what I mean? I know that one of them had a beard and one didn't, and one was taller than the other. Like, there must be a formula, right? that says like you fit in this mold that no one's ever going to ever remember.
You're a ghost. You're literally a ghost.
Which sucks for your dating life, right? But fuck.
So we go on these amazing, into the ruins. We take all these beautiful pictures, and it's getting dark, and they're like, all right, we're going to get out of here. We thank the tour guide. We get back in the truck, and they take us back on base, and they drop us off at the hangar where the Blackhawks are. And all the medevac guys see us get dropped off by this Forerunner or whatever, and all their jaws go down because they're like, wait, you guys were with them all day? Because they didn't know where we went, and we didn't know where we were going. And so they're like, hey, we're going to go eat dinner. Like, it was chow time. We were all going to go to the chow hall.
Yeah.
And we go to the chow hall, and remember Casper and the Chameleon were there with their other ghosts, their other spooks, their other apparitions, these people that don't exist, and that we were allowed to eat dinner with them. It was like getting invited to like the captain of the football team's table in the cafeteria in high school. And we got to sit down with them, and you and I remember we were like, if you guys ever come to Boston, and they're like, we won't. We're like, but if you do, here's our card. We'll take you to Fenway.
and you know those dudes from Brooklyn and the Bronx and shit are all fucking Yankees fans.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that they care about.
They never called, but I always hoped they would. And they are like one of the biggest mysteries of this thing. And 15 years later, we have no idea who they are. We spent the day with them, and we have no idea who they are.
You know, given what they do and how they are, I'm sure they keep tabs on us. They probably know everything about us, right? So maybe they're listening. Thank you. Chameleon.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Casper,
Yeah,
thank you.
seriously.
I'm sorry I didn't remember you were Puerto Rican and you're Dominican. I know you guys hate each other, but like for real. My apologies. Thank you for keeping us safe.
So then the next day we go on another medevac mission and we get flown to a place called Diwania, which is way down south in Iraq.
Is that Echo?
Yeah. And it was a couple of things that happened that day. So one of the things, we had to go through an emergency briefing. And again, it was one of those things where it was like, this is what you do if we get shot down. Stay in the aircraft unless it's on fire. Do what the crew says. And then we're in this sobering moment where they're like, if the crew is dead. And you're just like, huh?
Mm-hmm.
This is the emergency channel on the radio of stay with the aircraft. This is where the military will come and look for you. This is the emergency channel if the radio is still here. The emergency codes, remember this? Were in the pocket of the flight suit. Mm-hmm. And they told us, like, you have to snap the plastic and read these emergency codes and, like, whatever. And then they were like, and the firearms, they were in the tail. And that there were all these weapons for us, that even though this was a medevac, that there was weapons for us to use.
And here's how to load them and use them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, again, it's one of those things where you're just like, if the crew is dead, what?
But at this point, I was like, yo, we were already at Abu Ghraib. Like, I got this, man. Where do I load my bean bags? I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you were Combat Joe in full force. Like, you were ready to go. Like, you were ready to enlist. You wanted a uniform. We were joking that you were covering yourself in Crisco and naked at night, leaving the wire and killing terrorists with a buck knife. Like, you became a different person. And so when we get down to Diwania, and they had just taken rocket fire, and they had blown up the chow hall like 10 minutes before breakfast. It was crazy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And no one seemed to think twice about it. Like, they were obviously on edge, right? And it was a big to do for a lot of reasons. But everything to me felt like it was just like course of the day, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is what's probably going to happen. It happened. Let's just move on from it. Like, it just seemed like, and maybe I'm misreading the situation.
No, but again, like, we were with people that had been there for months and months and months on multiple deployments, and this is their normal.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of fucked up to think.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's really fucked up that in such a short period of time for us that it became our normal too.
Well, I mean, we could go, and we should probably have another talk about this, about like when people come home and what they should probably have access to. But I can quickly see in just the 14 plus days that we were there, how you can become unaffected, desensitized, and not understand how to process shit.
Yeah. One of the crazy things that we flew over, flying to Diwania, because again, this is in southern Iraq. Remember the line of tanks that were just dead in the desert in the middle of nowhere? And what had happened was these were Iraqi tanks that were headed for the Kuwaiti border.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just all laid out. And it was like this weird, it was like something out of Star Wars, because they were like miles and miles and miles away in the middle of like the driest desert. And there were just all of these tanks. And they were like, that's from 91. That's Desert Storm stuff. And we were like, well, why are they still there? And they were like, well, nobody's going to go get them. Why would you put forth the effort to go and like get these old tanks out of the middle of the desert? They're just out there rotting.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember it was so weird that you just saw these remnants of a previous war kind of left as like this weird monument. And the same thing happened to me when I was in Afghanistan, where, you know, we would see things that were left from like the Russians in Afghanistan. It was this weird reminder that, oh, this happened before. This isn't the first time that war has been here.
Imagine that's how you grew up.
Yeah.
like imagine being a civilian to one of those countries, and like your life is defined by the different things that are there.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and they're always there. It's so crazy. I remember that like graveyard of tanks, because one of the ones that we saw was literally like a parking lot for a stadium just full of dead tanks. They had pulled them off so they could get around them, but put them in one spot.
Yeah.
And you're like, we're like, oh, all these great tanks. What are these for? Yeah. And they're like, nah, man, like these are 30 years old at this point. Like,
yeah.
Like they're rotting, like, and you're like, holy.
And no, like, why would you go out there and try to, there's nothing you can do with them. You're not going to salvage them. You just leave them there. So they're just this scar on this otherwise perfect desert, that the wind is like made smooth. And then there's just this row of rotten tanks there. It was just very strange. So we went to Diwania for the day. Then we go back to Talil, and it's time to say bye and start making our way out of Iraq. And we've kind of been flying all over the place and doing all of this stuff. And the medics flew us, and then we got picked up by the guys that flew us in. There was like a drop off, and we get taken to this place called Camp Arifjan, which we did not go to on the way in. We went through Buring and Ali Al Salim on the way in, and we get taken to a place called Arifjan on the way out. And this begins our adjustment back to the real world now. That Camp Arifjan was affectionately known as Camp Cupcake.
Yep.
And it's this massive base where everybody has a day job, and it's a lot of, and I'm not belittling any of this, but it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of moving equipment and troops around. And the people that are stationed there have very specific jobs. There's a lot of computer stuff going on, coding, drone stuff, like that kind of stuff going on. But there's a swimming pool there.
And remember how kind of dicky I was? Because all of a sudden, like, we had just been outside the wire for 14 days, and we took it, like, not we. I'm dragging you down with this, right? But like I'm automatically taking rips and shots and shitting on people who are.
You were whispering, calling people fobbits and stuff, and I was like, dude, you're not even in the military. These are people that enlisted, and
I got caught up. What can I say?
So we get there, and we're disgustingly dirty.
Yeah.
Unkempt, skinnier, dirty, sunburned, fatigued, and gristly from mortar attacks and being on aircraft that took fire and Casper and the Chameleon and like rockets and like all of this crazy stuff. And then we get dropped off in civilization and taken
we
to
could have been models.
Yeah, and taken to this chow hall where for the first time in weeks we were eating off of real plates, remember? And there were glasses, real glasses, not like paper cups. And there was an ice machine where we were allowed to take as much ice as we wanted. And you and I were like, Tom Hanks when he gets rescued in Castaway. And he's like, I like ice. Like, we were, and I remember sitting in the chow hall, and it was clean, and we were disgusting, and there was music, and like real, like clanging of like silverware. And the guys that had picked us up were basically there to out-process us, to prove to the government that we made it out of Iraq, fill out the paperwork, sign the dotted line, and get us to the airport and get us the hell out of there. And all of these guys in Kuwait, they had not left Kuwait. So they hadn't been to Iraq at all. And we're now sitting in this chow hall telling war stories like these grisly Vietnam veterans, and it's me and you being idiots. And they were like, wait, you guys did what? And wait, you left the wire? Wait, you went here? Wait, you went there? And we're showing them pictures on the laptop that we had downloaded off the memory cards of our cameras. And it was like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's what I like. Literally, you talked about it earlier when we were with Casper and the Chameleon. And even before that, when we were with one of the majors, they sat down at our table. and we were sitting with them, and we were the coolest kids in the room. Like, one last time before we left, we were sitting there, and everyone was like, tell us what it was like. What were you doing? Like, and I mean, we're obviously in the business, but we weren't embellishing stories.
No, we were just telling them.
Yeah. And it, oh my God.
So you got the nickname Combat Joe, and I got the nickname the Brass Magnet, because everywhere I went, like, a general showed up. And that Brass Magnet nickname continued 5 years later when I went to Afghanistan too.
Is that what happened when you were in Afghanistan?
Every time we turn around, and it used to piss the guys off so bad because they had to be on their best behavior. They're like, fucking Carrie. Every time we turn around, there's a general coming over here or something. Like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Poor fucking Nick, man.
I know. He got it twice. He got it twice.
What an incredible dude. And then he's got to deal with that shit all the time. Every time he's around with you outside the country, he's got to deal with that.
So we go to Camp Cupcake. We take showers. We try to find clothes that smell the least. We get taken to the Kuwaiti airport, and we fly home. And there's a picture of us back at Logan, like sunburned, dirty, exhausted, laying on our like luggage cart.
Looking good.
I mean, sunburned. And the next day, we're back at work.
And that's at 21:30, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, looking at the time, like, we got rid of everything, which was incredible. Like, we went and did what we were supposed to do, amongst many other things. But that is 14 days later at 21:30, and we went to work the next morning.
Yeah. And I will say, from my perspective, and the same thing happened when I got home from Afghanistan too, I had a really hard time being normal again for a while. And I am going to preface this by saying this episode's coming out the week of Veterans Day. I am in no way attributing my experience to that of a service member. But I think one of the important things, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you and I got a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of the great and powerful Oz. We didn't get the full view that service members get, but we were given this very small glimpse of what life is like for them. And I remember not sleeping for weeks, nightmares, pacing around the house. And like you said, it wasn't until we got home that it kind of sank in what we had just been through. And the more we told the stories, like when we got back to the radio station and we're telling people these stories, their reaction to the things that we were talking about matter-of-factly, their horror about mortar attacks, rockets, countermeasure flares, insurgents, like all of this stuff, it was other people's reactions that kind of made me go, oh, maybe we should have been scared. Like, what the fuck? And it all kind of hit me. How was it for you?
I think it was the same. And you and I were talking about this earlier. We were there for
a few weeks.
Yeah, right. And we came back and it felt weird. It was hard to sleep. It was coming off of like the malaria medicine that we talked about. It was
like the jet lag.
Right. The realization of what you were exposed to. And it by no means is to the extent of what someone who has served has gone through.
Right.
But it has made me have a really different realization and respect for those who have gone through it. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, you just went overseas, man, you whatever, you get it. And they downplay what actually people are going through. And I've used, you mentioned earlier, I've been successful and we've both been very successful in our careers, but I've used what I learned from that moment 15 years ago to help to create opportunities for people who need things. I've been doing a lot with mental wellness and things of that nature, just trying to provide avenues for people who may need it at a free cost. And so it was incredible. It was eye-opening, but it was also eye-opening more so than worldly. It was eye-opening to what, if I'm feeling a taste of this, if you and I are getting a little glimpse of this from 14 days, imagine being a lifer. Imagine being there 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so.
And it's disrespectful to them to expect that they would just be fine.
Well, it's fucked. You say disrespectful. I agree with it. It's fucked to think that anybody is going to be able to adjust and just go back to it. You think about, like, I don't want to go on, but you think about from when our parents and our grandparents and stuff, when they came back, it's like, you just deal, right?
Yeah.
And like that idea and that thought process cannot hold now. Like, we know too much and we've grown too much. Right. So like, I always try, and I've been trying with my career to try to help do and be aware and raise awareness for anything. Because again, if we were there for 14 days and we were feeling off like this, imagine, the people that we know and love and even the people you have no fucking idea, like, that everyone has got something. So
it was profoundly impactful in my life. And when I talk about it to people, I'm like, I can't understate. I'm not trying to be dramatic. It's just, I was a different person before I went, and I came home a different person because, and I'm not talking about like trauma adjustment or anything like that. I'm talking about open-eyed worldview. Mm-hmm. I can't look at the world through the lens I used to look at it because I've seen something different now and I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And, not only that, but like having someone, like, I'm so grateful that you came. Obviously, number one, the trip would have happened without you. But thank God I have you to be able to talk about these stories with, because you're the only other person that understands.
Well, and we took camera and DAT and sound and audio and shit, but like, I'm literally the only person that can verify half this shit ever fucking happened.
But what I'm saying is, you and I had the same kind of experience. These civilians that get plucked out of the normal world and plopped somewhere else. I had the same kind of experience with Mike when I went to Afghanistan 5 years later. And one of the funniest things I've ever done is go to a wedding for a mutual friend of all of ours. And I got to take a picture with you and Mike at the same time. Like, these two guys that were part of these monumental experiences in my life. And you and Mike have this relationship that you're the only two people that could look at each other and just like nod and be like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I don't like Mike, right?
No.
I'm just joking. I fucking love Mike. He didn't have it as hard as we did, Carrie. So.
We had to do it for the first time together.
I'm joking.
We're the OGs.
I absolutely love Mike.
I'm so glad. I'm sad that it took us 15 years, but I'm glad you and I sat down and did this, because I'm glad we have the photo books, and I'm glad we sat down and did this, because as we get older and history judges these wars and people look back, our perspective is this really unique thing. Like, I tell people all the time, watch Generation Kill. that HBO miniseries about the original Marines' push into Baghdad with the Rolling Stone reporter, because there are so many small moments of them picking on the reporter and the reporter being that fish out of water that didn't know how to put the gear on and like all these little things. And I think about you and I think about Mike and I think about the experiences and I'm like, that was kind of like what it was like for us. Those small ball busting moments that we got to spend with the guys out of everything. That's the stuff that means the most to me.
Well, it was the reality of everything, right? The people, the personalities, the humbling humanity of everyone that I think was so absolutely incredible, because we did learn a lot and we saw a lot, but much like you, I connect every moment to an experience that I had with another person.
Yeah.
And, you know, Nick and Greg and Major and everyone else, like I connect those moments in my mind to that, and I connect a lot of it to you. And it changed my life, and I think it changed a lot of other people's lives, not us. Like the other reality that we're not talking about right now is that, you know, we as radio people, especially with AAF, we're on one of the biggest stations in Boston. Like the fact that we went to a war zone to find people who listened to us and trusted us and cried with us and laughed with us and like brought them some semblance of life. We literally touched thousands and thousands of people in ways that can never, ever be duplicated. And I think that's part of the journey and part of what made this thing so special.
Well, people still come up to me all the time about it. And one of the things we have to talk about is the T-shirts. The T-shirts, we found out, became a good luck charm because every person we met who got a T-shirt came home. Now, it's sad to say that there are several people in the photographs that you and I have that aren't with us anymore, including Greg Sapp. And the last time you and I were actually together in the same room was at his funeral.
Right.
And that experience of, well, the T-shirts, they were this tangible gift that we could offer. But then the further along the trip went, it was like, well, okay, well, I want one of those shirts. When I went to Afghanistan 5 years later, the guys were like, well, I heard from the guys you met in Iraq that if you got a T-shirt from Mistress Carrie, that meant I was coming home. And so going to Afghanistan, the shirts meant something different because they had heard about these shirts that you and I had given out. And so the guys were like, well, if I get one, I'm going home. And that was this whole other. So when I see people, and every once in a while I see someone out wearing one of these old faded AAF shirts, and, you know, as I go to promotions and people know I'm going to be there, they bust out these old shirts and people send me pictures of the shirts in shadow boxes and, you know, with their military stuff and that they saved them. And I've had wives come and say that now that their husbands are no longer with them and they went through their husband's stuff, that T-shirt was in with their army gear. And there is this ripple effect of what those trips have kind of taken on.
Well, how do you carry that? Like, that's a horrible burden to carry. And maybe it's not a burden, but like you feel like if I had more T-shirts or, yeah.
I mean, I gave a T-shirt to someone in Afghanistan that was on their way home because they were ill. He's a hero. His name was Sergeant Edward Grace. He had somebody in his unit get shot and they needed blood, and he donated emergency blood, like after being in the mountains of Afghanistan on foot patrols every day. And something came up weird in his blood that he had donated. And they sent him to see the doc, and he got diagnosed with cancer. He got diagnosed with cancer in Afghanistan, and they were sending him home, and they asked if I would come and visit him before he got sent home. And he knew he was sick. He knew he was getting sent home. And he when I was spending time with him in the hospital waiting for his flight home, he said, I heard about those T-shirts. Can I get my T-shirt? And he died 6 weeks later of cancer, but he was home with his family, at least, getting treatment.
Right.
And I have a picture of me with him giving him one of those T-shirts. And so it seems so ridiculous to talk about a T-shirt meaning something more than it just being a T-shirt. But a T-shirt is a T-shirt, but it's also like love. It's also something else that we gave. And so, I have those shirts framed and hanging up in my studio and like keep them, and they mean the world, I'm just so grateful for everyone that we met and the stories they entrusted us with and that experience. I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Yeah, it's been an absolute incredible journey.
Yeah. And 15 years later, it still feels palpable like it was yesterday. You know what I mean? Like I can still smell things and I can still remember what things felt like. And it's weird that the memories are still that strong.
I remember the nacho cheese we got to put on everything at every mess hall that we went to.
That cheese was delicious. And we didn't care about gaining any weight because we were so skinny.
Really, oh my God. No joke. 5,000 calories at a meal. Boom. Let's
People
do
were
this.
like, you guys are so skinny. We're like, we're on the Baghdad diet.
We should have come home and started a service for the Baghdad diet.
We're going to keep you up for 14 days straight, physically exert you, dehydrate you, and scare the shit out of you, and you will lose weight.
For $14.99 a month. And if you act now, you and a friend can both go to Iraq. That's how they should change their recruiting message.
Do you want to get ripped and skinny and eat 5,000 calories a day and never get fat?
I kind of think we're onto something, right?
Thank you so much for doing this. I know that we've been talking forever, and you and I have been messaging back and forth all through COVID about making the time to do this, but I'm so glad that we did.
Of course, and I'm happy we got to talk about it. I'm happy we got to give some actual legitimacy to some of your stories, which I don't know if they're true, but also kind of like talk a little bit more about the things that I think our troops do need when they're coming home. And even if we can shine a little bit of light on it, we're not the answers. But if it helps someone to think that maybe they need to talk to someone or do something or a resource to step in on your show or whatever, like I think that's super duper important. These are the people protecting us, and we got to protect them when they come home.
We've asked a lot of them over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, it was really good to see you.
It's great to see you. Can we do this again?
Yeah, we can do this anytime.
I want to come into your studio this time. So
well, come on up and visit. I would love to see you. This stupid pandemic is finally, hopefully, getting to a point where we're allowed to be in the same room with each other again.
Oh, God. I'm double vaccinated and get tested probably 4 or 5 times a week right now. So,
jeez.
Yeah, between producing shows and people coming into studio and stuff, it's constant. I bet. Yeah.
Well, I'm just locked in MCHQ all the time, so.
Well, I'll take a test and then I'll come up.
I would love that.
And Katie is from, my significant other is from Maine. And so we drive through, not on a regular basis, but enough. So like grab a day or so to pop in. And,
I would love that.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that we're not, conveniently located to be able to hang out all the time. And I don't spend a lot of time in New York, but I'm hoping that once the world kind of opens back up again a little bit to, be able to come to New York, and we got to get together and belly up at a bar and laugh about some of these ridiculous stories.
Well, let me know. And we have a house in Connecticut. So on the way to New York, we can stop and then take the train in so we don't have to drive.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for everything. Happy Veterans Day to all of the veterans out there. Thank you all for your service and to all of the Boston to Baghdad troops that we met along the way. I know I speak for myself, but I'm pretty confident I can speak for you too, Joe, that we think about you all the time. And we hope that you're doing well. And, you know, if any of you, especially Casper and the Chameleon, if you hear this, go to MistressCarrie.com, click the contact button, and send me a message because we want to know what your names are.
Love you, Nick.
There he is, the one and only Joe DeAngelis, my producer from my Boston to Baghdad trip back in 2006. You can check out a lot of the pictures from the trip. There's a photo gallery linked in the show notes of this podcast. There's also a corresponding playlist there, as I make for every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And this week's playlist is filled with music in honor of our troops, especially the week of Veterans Day. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything from the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the Sit Rep. It's all your rock news, music headlines, and industry info in less than 5 minutes. Thanks once again to our sponsor, Digital Federal Credit Union. You can find them online at dcu.org. And with the holidays on the way, there is no better gift than the gift of Mistress Carrie. So log on to MistressCarrie.com and check out my official online store. And once again, on behalf of Joe and I, happy Veterans Day to all of the veterans out there. Thank you all so much for your service and your sacrifice. And to all of our Boston to Baghdad troops, we love you. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.